We're ready to call this board meeting to order. Is Ms. Taylor on the line?
Yes, I am.
If you would please call the roll.
Chairman Vasquez,
Present.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Present.
Member Gaines,
Present.
Member Cohen,
Present.
Deputy Controller Stowers.
Present.
A quorum is present and the board meeting is called to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could just have you please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, let me just, another friendly reminder. I know we do have our chair, or I should say the president, Ernie Dronenberg, with us, as well as Jeff Prang from the assessors. And I just want to remind everybody that we're all sharing the same line, so simultaneously. So just to be aware as we speak, that we speak in the audio as clean and clear as possible, and to wait to be recognized so the transcriptionists can make sure that they're taking down minutes correctly in terms of who's moving any motions or who's speaking, so we can record this as accurate as possible. With that, let me have Ms. Taylor please announce the first order of business.
Our first order of business is an announcement regarding public teleconference participation. Good morning and thank you for joining today's Board of Equalization meeting via teleconference. Throughout the duration of today's meeting, you will primarily be in a listen-only mode. As you may know from our public agenda notice and our website, we have requested that individuals who wish to make a public comment fill out the public comment submission form found on our additional information webpage in advance of today's meeting, or alternatively, participate in today's meeting by providing your public comment live. After the presentation of an item has concluded, we will begin by identifying any public comment requests that have been received by our board proceeding staff, with the AT&T operator providing directions for you to identify yourself. After all known public commenters have been called, the operator will also provide public comment instructions to individuals participating via teleconference. Accordingly, if you intend to make a public comment today, we recommend dialing into the meeting on the teleconference line, as the audio broadcast on our website experiences a 1 to 3 minute delay. When giving a public comment, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We ask that everyone who is not intending to make a public comment please mute their line or minimize background noise. If there are technical difficulties when we are in the public comment portion of our meeting, we will do our best to read submitted comments into the record at appropriate times. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Thank you. Members, our hearing today is to follow up on our prior actions on January 14th and the 15th to hear and discuss the Prop 19 strike team report updates and to take actions that have been or need to be taken to implement it. Last month, the board took action and adopted staff recommendations on 5 items. Number 1, the Prop 19 legal analysis. 2, our proposed legislative package. 3, the BOE guidance and rulemaking. 4, the BOE and assessors forms. And 5, a Prop 19 communications and education plan. We also agreed to send a letter to the legislature supporting the legislative package that included 3 key statutes to implement Prop 19 by the constitutional deadline, section 63.2, parent-child and grandparent to grandchild exclusions by February 16th. Section 69.1, wildfire and governor declared natural disaster base year value transfers by April 1st, and Section 69.6 seniors and disabled base year value transfers by April 1st. We emphasize the urgency so that taxpayers' rights are protected in an effective and uniform manner, and so they are treated fairly and understand the impact on transfers on their homes and property. We even urge the legislators to consider and approve an abbreviated form of it before the February 16th deadline. We also voted to schedule this meeting today for 3 reasons. One, to ensure, to update everyone on what has been done or is pending before the February 16th deadline. 2, to clarify where assessors, petitioners, and public can obtain the information they need to comply. And 3, to make any decisions or take action on additional steps that may be needed. We have 3 caveats that I need to mention. First, although our legislative package is being considered, it has not yet been introduced. As you know, until a bill is introduced, we won't know how closely the end product will align with what we submitted. It's my understanding, and I am optimistic, that it will be introduced soon. Second, when the bill is introduced and is available, we'll make sure it's forwarded to you immediately for review. If it aligns with what we proposed and is consistent with the staff's recommendation, I would like your pre-authorization to have the executive director draft a letter of support on behalf of the board and submit the letter for your review, if at all possible, depending on whether the bill is available on Friday or next Tuesday. The ED will cover this further in detail under the legislative update on the agenda. And third, at the last meeting, we discussed and received a report from the legal staff on the use of the emergency rulemaking for Prop 19's implementation. Since then, it was determined that Prop 19 doesn't meet the emergency conditions. Alternatively, the legislative could provide a special exemption. Mr. Moon will explain this further in his update on rulemaking. And finally, for all those who are listening or wish to ask questions, we encourage your input. However, we cannot advise you on your personal situation in this meeting, and we cannot change any of the deadlines that are listed in Prop 19. The role of the board is to clarify and administer the intent of Prop 19. And we have a special Prop 19 webpage posted on the BOE website with some information, and we will issue more as soon as it's possible. With that, let me open it up to the members if they have any opening remarks. And I see a hand already from Ms. Cohen.
Thank you.
Member Cohen, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Now I can hear you.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and members of the public. I'm very excited to be here. I do want to take some time to talk a little bit about Prop 19 and where we are and some of my thoughts. Over the past several board meetings and various outreach convenings across the state, through constituent inquiries and the many conversations we're all having with our elected family members and our friends and our colleagues, we've received extensive testimony and feedback from California families who will be impacted on Prop 19. Just want to set that up. The largest concern are about the provisions of Proposition 19 that will come into effect on the 16th, restricting the ability for families to transfer their homes and their property to the next generation. This testimony that we heard expressed the concern that families will be forced to sell their homes and their farms and other property because it will be reassessed. And under Prop 19, there is only one exception: if a child or a qualified grandchild decides to live in the family home. And I believe that Prop 19 needs to be amended to restore the property tax laws enacted through Proposition 58 and Prop 193 that allowed families to transfer their homes and other properties without penalty or without reassessment. I also believe that, frankly, because of the impact of COVID-19, we need to amend the Constitution to extend the time deadlines for the completion of the sales and transfers of property. So, to put my views into context, I want to take a look at the realities surrounding the passage of Prop 19. Mr. Chair, you commented on that we've put together an extensive package, somewhere around 40 amendments, but yet we have not found a sponsor, and that's concerning. You know, to go back as a point in history, Prop 19 was championed as an initiative that provided the much needed assistance to seniors, to severely disabled, to families, to victims of fires and natural disasters, while simultaneously providing revenue for wildfire protection agencies and counties. Lofty and novel, and I think having good intentions. However, a broad bipartisan coalition of support, including business and labor, as well as elected leaders across the state of California, have supported Prop 19. It's only in its recent passage that we are coming to see how challenging this implementation of Prop 19 will be. According to the most recent figures, over $57 million was spent on the yes on Prop 19 side, $57 million to get this initiative passed, with over $40 million from the California Association of Realtors Issues Mobilization Political Action Committee. That is a lot of money to influence voters, and only $69,000 was spent against Prop 19. So what does that mean? That means that Prop 19 side outspent the no on Prop 19 side by a ratio of 826 to 1. 826 to 1. Now, in my many conversations, people have asked me, how did this happen? Well, when you follow the numbers and you look at the money, you can see quite clearly how it has happened. Television advertising promoted Prop 19 as the law that would quote, limit taxes on wildfire victims so families can move to replacement homes without tax penalty. Yeah, that's true. Prop 19 was enacted with a margin of around 51% yes, 49% no. Californians have good hearts. I have a good heart. We all have a good heart. And they're generous, and they're thoughtful, and they're caring. There was great interest in providing assistance to the victims of the wildfires and natural disasters so that they could transfer their Prop 13 base year values to any county in the state of California. Californians also wanted to provide much needed revenue to wildfire agencies and counties that responded to these disasters. Again, very novel. Now, I think that we should, however, I don't believe that enough attention was paid to the fact that Prop 19 also took away protections that allowed property to be transferred from one generation to another. And for so many middle-class families, and particularly families of color, the home is a valuable savings account. It's a 401k. It's how many people put their kids through college. It's how people plan to retire on. And I've been on calls, on many calls of leaders, not only in the African-American community, but largely in communities of color, where the pain of family losing their single most important asset is causing uncertainty and fear. And these same fears have been expressed by other communities and middle-class families, working-class families, family farmers, as stated in a study. I'm going to quote a study that McKinsey and Company published on financial inclusion. Historically, buying a home is the key to as a key step in building family wealth. And Prop 19 will force the middle-class families and families of color to sell their single most important financial aspect, which we call a family home. Our fathers and mothers and grandfathers and grandmothers worked hard to purchase homes. They hoped that their children would be able to benefit from this hard work. And quite frankly, we're not talking about $25 million palaces in Malibu. We're talking about the middle-class homes in Baldwin Hills and Baby Hunters Point and Encanto in San Diego and other communities throughout California. And we've heard from testimony from other similar issues that will have an impact on family farms throughout our state. Well, that's why I hope that everyone on this call will join me and urge the legislature to place on the ballot at the next general election a corrective constitutional amendment to Prop 19, a corrective constitutional amendment that could restore the ability of families to transfer their principal residence to other property and other properties as currently provided under Prop 58 and Prop 193. After that's accomplished, I think there'll be plenty of time to review concerns that transfers of family homes worth many millions of dollars benefit families of Hollywood movie stars and out-of-state investors. We can address that, but let's restore what the generational loss that's happening. There will be time to address how to backfill the revenue to wildfire agencies and counties. These discussions are important, but they should occur in full public view and give we take in broad feedback. So I'm asking that you join me in working with the legislature to encourage a constitutional amendment. Mr. Chair, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, I don't think you'll find any opposition from this board.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think just for the public, I think I've been on a lot of these forums, and I'm sure you have and other members, people don't really understand our role. We're not legislators. And I think it's good to get that information out. At the end of the day, we're only here as a board to implement what laws are passed or legislation is passed, and in this case, a constitutional amendment, and to try to make sure that it is implemented as fairly and as possible. But with that, let me see if there's any other members that want to have. I see Member Gaines. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. I want to thank Member Cohen for her great comments, and I'm in complete agreement, and also with you, Chair Vasquez. When we take a look at Prop 19, the good aspect of it is that it gave you the ability to have a base year transfer to any county in the state if you're over 55 years of age or disabled or a fire victim. And I think we're all in agreement that that's great and that's a good benefit for folks. But to tax families and family farms who are trying to pass property on to continue the farm for the next generation, or families that are trying to pass that asset on, acquiring a home and paying a home off is usually the asset that a family has. They paid into Social Security and things of that sort, so they have their Social Security, and then they have their cash that's in their home. And if they're fortunate, they've got some sort of IRA or a 401k or something of that nature. But the ability to pass that on to your children or grandchildren is so critical, so important to not put that burden on the family to make a decision as to whether they need to sell that home or not, because the taxes are reappraised and go up dramatically. And we had that example cited. It's a bigger dollar amount, but it was with a family farm where the taxes went up 800%. And you could see for a family farm passing that down, if it was a kind of a low margin type of farming or ranching they're doing, like cattle, for instance, it's pretty low margin. And so you need a lot of land, and over time that land can become very valuable, but you've got a family tradition that wants to pass that family ranch or farm on to the next generation, and yet those taxes go up dramatically, and that could kill off the ranching operation or the farm. So I'm in complete agreement, and if we could get a sponsor in the legislature that would carry a bill through for these fixes and get it on the ballot as soon as possible, I'm in complete support of that. I did have I attended a meeting with the Farm Bureau, and got to talk about Prop 19 at that meeting, and a virtual meeting, and it was very helpful, but it was very sad hearing some of the stories about what some folks are going through. I spoke to a dairy family, and there's a lot of consolidation going on with dairy farms right now. It has been going on for years in California, so it's a struggle for them to hang on. And of course, we heard the stories in our own hearing about the families with a disabled child, maybe an adult child, but still needs that extra care. And yet they're going to be socked with a tax increase. And I think people didn't realize that if you were disabled, you got the benefit for the base year transfer to all 58 counties, but you're going to get socked on the taxes if you want to pass that home on. Let's say that's an asset that you could rent out and provide income for that disabled child, or a place to live if they've got the right care, in-home care. So I'm in complete agreement, and I don't know if we need to formalize this in terms of some sort of motion. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do that, but I'm in agreement with both of your comments, both from Member Cohen and Member Vasquez. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members who wish to speak? Vice Chair Schaefer, I see you moving. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Vasquez. We had a listening post in San Diego last Friday and had between 200 and 300 taxpayers contact us with questions, written and oral, and we had our expert counsel, and we had the assessors from Imperial County, Riverside County, and Mr. Dronenberg, of course, on behalf of all assessors and behalf of San Diego County. And we spent most of Friday, at least a couple of hours, assisting inquiries on Prop 19. I think that was a great service to the counties that participated. And while I support Ms. Cohen and what she's offering to us, and I look forward to Member Gaines to know who in the legislature has an interest and an ability to help us accomplish what we're trying to do. We had over 1,000 people on Zoom participate in our hearing from 12 to 2 last Friday. So I want you to know that District 4 is doing what we can to clarify things and to help everybody in California deal with the ambiguities in Prop 19. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I jump in
Thank
for a second?
Yes, Member Cohen, go ahead.
I wanted to affirm Vice Chair Mike Schaefer's meeting. I had a chance to jump on and listen to the discussion for about half hour to about 45 minutes, and it was excellent. It was very well attended. It was very thoughtful. You had a great panel. So my compliments to you, Mike, and to Gary and your team for setting that up. Also, Ernie and Jordan Marks and Ernie Jordanberg also did a fantastic job on this panel as well.
Oh. Thank you. Any other members?
Chairman Vasquez, Deputy
Ms. Stowers, go ahead.
Thank you. Prop 19, I'd like to kind of go back to your statement, Chair Vasquez. Our role here is to implement, and that's what we're trying to do for a very complicated measure that has some very negative consequences. And I understand that the voters probably did not understand, but I would like to restate that individual board members may take, as an elected official, may take a position and even seek someone to sponsor a constitutional amendment. But as this board as a whole, we cannot do that. We're charged with implementing and not seeking amendments or taking positions on legislation. I believe our chief counsel has stated that to us several times.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hearing no other comments, just thank the members. And if I can get Ms. Taylor to please call our first sub-item.
Our first sub-item is 1A, public policy hearings, Proposition 19, strike team updates on Proposition 19, the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled, Families and Victims of Wildfire or Natural Disasters Act of 2020, update on the legal analysis associated with the implementation of Proposition 19, presented by Mr. Moon.
Mr. Moon, if you're available, would you please provide us with any updates regarding Prop 19?
Yes, Chairman Vasquez, this is Richard Moon with the Legal Department, and we don't have any updates to the January legal analysis that's been published, but what we focused on is drafting further guidance based on some of the legal conclusions in that memo and trying to flesh those out to specific situations. And you'll hear a little more about that in the guidance and rulemaking report portion of today's meeting. But I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
I have just a couple questions, but let me see if any of the members have any questions for you before I start. Seeing no hands, I will go ahead. Mr. Moon, my first question is, first, thank you, for the analysis you did back in January 8th, which is very helpful, by the way, especially on the website. And on your ongoing legal analysis, I wanted to know if we'll be addressing the eligibility of multiple transferees who receive and wish to take turns to continue a principal residence.
Yes, this is Richard Boone again. We will be addressing that, and as you said, it is in the legal analysis. We will be fleshing that out a little bit more in regulations and or guidance. And as the legal memo indicates, it is possible to, as you put it, take turns for siblings in the family home, to use it as a family home and maintain the benefit of the exclusion. However, I do want to make clear that a subsequent child is eligible to move in and take the benefit of that exclusion only if they were also a recipient of the property from their parent at the initial transfer. So, for example, if a parent has 2 children and they give 100% of the home to child 1 who moves in, and then 2 years later that child moves out and gives the home to his sibling who moves in, then that home is not going to qualify because child did not receive the home from the parents. But if the parents gave the home 50-50 to each child and they did that, then it would qualify. And the reason is because sibling-to-sibling transfers are not excluded by Proposition 19, while parent-to-child transfers are excluded.
Thank you. Will we also have information on the process the children would use to do this, and what would they be submitting to the assessor? Do we know that?
So there will be information as to process, and so what we know is that anybody who qualifies the family home as their principal residence would need to file a homeowner's exclusion, and they would also need to file the exclusion exemption, and they would also need to file the exclusion claim form with the assessor. So when the child moves out, they would need to inform the assessor that they are no longer eligible for the homeowner's exemption. And then when the second child moves in, they would need to file the homeowner's exemption, and they would also need to file a claim for the exclusion as well.
Thank you. My second question is, would you also be able to address any updated legal analysis, whether a parent-child exclusion under Prop 19 would still apply if a parent leaves her property to children to share and share alike? I think you kind of touched on it.
Yeah, so we will address share and share alike trusts in future guidance. And what I can say is that although Proposition 19 changes the kind of property that can be excluded using such trust, it didn't change the rules that govern the trust. So a parent can still leave a family home to the children in a share and share alike trust. And if the children desire, there is still a method by which one child can inherit the entire property instead of each sharing it and still maintain the exclusion on the entire home. It's just that now the type of property that can be excluded is different.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I believe that even without the legislation, it's critical that we issue sound written guidance on this. I'm telling practitioners and constituents to check our Prop 19 web page daily for updates. But I want to remind people that they should address their individual situations with their practitioners, because I don't want to mislead folks. And some of this is very critical information as they choose to pass on their inheritance to their children. With that, let me have, is Ms. Fleming available? I understand, Ms. Fleming. Ms. Fleming, I would like you to have an action plan for our proposed rules, LTAs, forms, or other guidance for the February 23rd meeting, consistent with your priorities and plan. I think we'd be negligent if if we fail to act. If we issue guidance and draft rules or any information, we need to be sure to modify and update it as legislation continues to be passed. Is an action plan for February 23rd doable, Ms. Fleming?
Thank you, Chairman and honorable members. This is Brenda Fleming. To answer your questions directly, yes, sir. It is doable by the 23rd. As you'll hear more today under that segment of the discussion, we are in the process of fleshing some of the details out. We will use that information to draft the guidance that needed and also to prepare for the rulemaking process. And our intent is to responsibly make sure that that information is provided to the board for our implementation at the February 23rd meeting. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ms. Stowers has a hand up. Let me just finish my last little remark. And you know, this board, I know in listening to, especially the comments you made earlier today, we obviously take our responsibility very seriously, and we will keep the legislator informed, but we cannot sit on our hands and do nothing. So I think it's real critical that we keep on top of this, because this is constantly going to be changing as we're hearing. And hopefully, like I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, that we should have a bill soon where this thing is starting to take shape and move forward. And at that point, I think we need to make sure that we all weigh in as much as we can with those that we know. With that, let me have Ms. Stowers had a hand and Mr. Gaines, Member Gaines. Ms. Stowers.
Thank you very much. Just really quick, I just wanted to say I agree with what you're saying about having some guidance and rulemaking with the plan provided to the board at our next meeting. One thing that strikes me is that the legal memo that our Chief Counsel, Mr. Moon, prepared responding to questions is an excellent memo. It really outlines some of the critical items. But my concern is that if we don't move forward with guidance, and especially rulemaking, that legal memo could be perceived as an underground regulation. So I highly encourage that we move forward in the rulemaking process.
Thank you, Deputy Controller Stowers. This is Brenda Fleming. We concur.
Member Gaines, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Just a couple of comments, because there is a lack of clarity in the law. So it's my understanding that people are going to interpret it as best they can until clarity is provided. So here we have cases going on where people are passing away and property still to be passed on. You know, I don't know how you deal with that other than trying to interpret it the best as you can until we get clarity from the legislature. I guess we have some of our own rulemaking authority. I don't know. I don't have clarity in terms of what we can do in providing clarity as the BOE versus the legislature. It is an initiative, so we can't change the intent of the initiative without going back to a vote of the people. So maybe if we get a little clarity from that, in that regard from Richard Moon, that'd be helpful. But before you comment, I do want to thank both Richard Moon and David Young with my Zoom workshop that I had with the California Farm Bureau. So they were available. They asked a myriad of questions. They were asked a myriad of questions and did a great job in representing the Board of Equalization. So thank you for that. Richard, can you provide a little clarity on what we do in the interim in terms of?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Be happy to. This is Richard Moon from the legal department again. So our authority extends to chiefly two things. One is regulations, and one is, I guess, what we can just group as a category less informal or more informal guidance. Okay. And so if we are, and you'll hear more about this later on in the agenda, but we are in the process of drafting regulations. And we will either do them through the emergency rulemaking process or through the regular rulemaking process. At the same time, we're putting forward guidance that hopefully answers a lot of the questions that remain. And that guidance will initially take the form of a letter to assessors, and that will touch on many different things, but two of the sort of the chief things that it will touch on are filing requirements, and then valuation of the property in instances that sort of aren't the vanilla one-parent child transfers 100% of the property to one child. And so the LTA will address many of those types of questions. And then once that LTA is released, I believe that our next step, and Dave Young can confirm this, but I believe that our next step would be to look at the other types of guidance that we have out there, including assessors' handbooks that may need to be updated and changed, as well as even less formal guidance in the form of our webpage, where we have a frequently asked questions section that will be updated as well.
Okay, that is great. And I'm wondering if you could touch on this again, but you have commented about irrevocable trusts, and I know those are different from trust to trust, but I think you had given kind of a broad statement with regard to the passage of property from parent to child through an irrevocable trust. Can you reiterate that again, just for the public, so that they are aware of it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our general rules, and again, this is another situation where Prop 19 does not affect the rules that govern the trust, although it may affect the type of property that can be passed through the trust and get exclusion. And so the general rule for trusts are that the date of the change in ownership of an irrevocable trust is the date that the property is transferred to that irrevocable trust, or the date that the trust becomes irrevocable. So if there's an irrevocable trust and property is transferred into that trust prior to February 16th, the Propositions 58-193, the old rules, would apply. But if that property transfer occurs after the 16th or after, then the new Proposition 19 rules would apply. And again, I need to caveat that by saying, you really need to look at the specific terms of that trust. Yes. In a revocable trust, even if the property is transferred to that revocable trust, the property is still considered to be owned by the trustor of that trust, and that's because the trust is revocable. So if they put it in, they can still take it out. Yes. So there's no transfer to have considered to have been done.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, I know we have two of our assessors on this call with us. Do we have any, or do they wish to speak on this? I see Jeff Prang.
I don't have anything to speak on that specific item, but if we're on your agenda, if we're at that point, I do have a report to offer, or but I think I'd probably want to follow our president, Mr. Dronenberg.
Well, we were scheduled to be later, and so that's why I didn't say anything now.
No, you're right. You're coming up actually next. I just didn't know if you had any comments on what we've discussed so far.
No, I think that Mr. Moon has explained things fairly concisely and consistent with how we are how we're viewing the interpretation as well.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, do we have any written comments on this item?
Yes, we have 3 written comments on this item. The first item will be read by Ms. Renati. The first comment is from an unidentified retired public school educator. The section of Prop 19 that overturns Propositions 58 and 193 will disproportionately land on the backs of California's middle class, causing a loss of generational properties due to excessive property tax increases. Our taxpayers deserve to have Prop 19's true consequences publicly scrutinized. The 2020 official voter guide specifically stated that among Prop 19's pro-arguments, closes unfair tax loopholes used by wealthy out-of-state investors and protects Prop 13 savings. This thesis of reform is completely false. 1, right now out-of-state and Lebowski families predictably continue to protect their inherited properties through a variety of legal maneuvers to which those of modest means do not have access. 2, Prop 19 removes existing property transfer protections of Propositions 13, 58, and 193 for all family properties. It imposes convoluted restrictions regarding primary residence status and, even then, imposes arbitrary limitations on exemptions. Heirs of modest means will be forced to sell family property due to sudden unsustainable increases in property taxes. This measure's structure was purposely misleading. It conflates seniors, heirs, and victims of fire, significantly disparate life situations, and it pits one's needs against the others in a ham-handed effort to manipulate voters. This proposition passed by a barely 2% margin. By contrast, Prop 58 earned more than 75% voter approval in 1986 because it addressed a very real threat to families of modest means. Rising real estate prices in the intervening years make the threat even more dire today. Voters were clearly exploited by deceptive language, false claims, and the devastating distractions of 2020. It is reasonable to extrapolate that if transparently presented, this measure would never pass. This proposition disproportionately impacts middle-class Californians. It takes multiple generations and innumerable sacrifices for people of modest income to acquire property in California. The majority of these properties are not intended for profit. Such a property represents a life savings, a family's share of sense of place, values, tradition. Its worth is intangible. Despite its rhetoric, Prop 19 does nothing to close property tax loopholes enjoyed by the wealthy or business classes. Homeowners of modest means do not have the luxury of a financial cushion needed to pursue legal workarounds or to weather the changing winds of federal or state laws. Make no mistake, middle-class Californians will be forced out of their homes, their communities, and likely their state because of Prop 19 reverses that actual reform they have relied on since 1978. If we cannot reinstate Propositions 58 and 193, any new tax reform for intergenerational family property should, at the very least, be nuanced and informed by substantive distinctions. Is the property owned by California residents? Is the property for personal use, primary residence, and/or vacation, or does it generate income? If existing law is to be changed so that there are limitations imposed, is the exemption amount arbitrary, or does it fairly reflect California's diversity? Equal is not equitable. Develop a taxation formula for private residential transfers that ensures equitable impact and protection by applying suitable regional factors. Future property tax legislation should target the problem, not our own middle-class residents. Voters have the right to be forthright explanation of any tax proposal so they can weigh the ramifications. As a retired public school educator, I truly hope the board will do everything in its power to expose and remedy Prop 19's disingenuous gutting of intergenerational property transfers. The second comment is from John Kupal, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. He states, our phones continue to ring off the hook from thousands of homeowners and small business owners about the loss of the intergenerational protections of Prop 58. Our organization is ready, willing, and able to assist in the drafting of proposed constitutional amendment to redress the problem. As an aside, virtually no one was aware that this was an impact of Prop 19. And the final comment will be read by Ms. Taylor. This comment is from Shersha Folsom. I would like to comment on the following. 1, legislative intent to preserve family homes not fulfilled. The legislative intent to protect and preserve family homes does not carry through for families with more than one child in the Prop 19 legislation. For example, my family. We are a family with 2 siblings. Each of us had planned to move into one of 2 homes as we cannot afford to purchase our own homes. These modest single-family homes were purchased at great sacrifice by my grandparents using post-World War II GI loans in the 1950s. For 70 years, my grandparents, my parents, and now my brother and I have invested, cleaned, maintained, repaired, and worked extremely diligently to preserve this modest intergenerational familial wealth gain. My parents currently use these homes for their retirement income, a modest $4,000 a month of rental income, their only income in addition to their collective $650 a month in Social Security. Now our parents will not only have to forego their rental income before their death, but they will have to decide which child is more deserving of inheriting a tax burden. Is this equal treatment under the law? We propose that the rules be rewritten to accommodate more than one child inheriting a home with the tax shelter if they intend to live in that home. The requirement the parent should move into the home before they die in order to pass on their property tax shelter is extremely unreasonable and should be removed. If the legislative intent is that a home should be used as a primary residence in order to keep the modest tax shelter, how does forcing the parents to move into a given home prior to their death achieve that goal? How does limiting the home to only one primary residence, no matter how many siblings there are, achieve the goal of preserving family homes? Simply put, the requirement to have the parents live in only one home and only allow one home to have a property tax shelter only serves to force multi-sibling families to sell their family homes so that realtors can make more money on fees. In this regard, the legislative intent of Proposition 19 is erroneous at best and fraudulent at worst. Please remove the requirement that parents move into the home prior to their passing in order for their children to move in and utilize the homes as primary residences. Please allow for more than one home and property tax shelter to be passed on to families with more than one child. Changing these rules would help multi-sibling families like mine to actually retain their family homes. 2, Prop 19's impacts on tenants and the primary residence usage limits for children. The legislature has not considered the ill effects of the Prop 19 as currently written will have on California's already beleaguered tenants. California has put chronic lack of rental inventory. Prop 19 requires that rentals intended to be passed on to children be taken off the rental market before someone dies and after the home is inherited. We've reached the 3-minute limit.
Thank you. Is there any, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Taylor, check with AT&T.
Yes, thank you. AT&T moderator, we will now take public comment. Each caller will have up to 3 minutes to speak. For the record, we would request that the callers provide their names. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment regarding this matter?
Thank you. If you wish to make a public comment, please press 1 and then 0 at this time. And I do have a few that are queuing up now. We are gathering their name. One moment for the first comment. And first, we'll go to the line of Alicia. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Alicia Gamez. I'm an attorney practicing in San Francisco. And I am calling or wanting the board's either to inform the board or to have feedback from the board regarding certain county assessors' apparent demands that people in order to have a transfer be effective, they are requiring that both the transfer be completed and it be recorded prior to February 15 or 16. That is contrary to California law, as I understand it, and I just want the board's sense of their rules implementing whether a document must be recorded prior to the implementation of Prop 19 in order to be effective.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the line of Bonnie. Please go ahead.
They actually had the same question as the previous commenter, so I'm all set.
Thank you. And next, we'll go to the line of Ferial. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My comment is related to the communication that was read. I'm a 68-year-old mother of 2 children, single mother, and I feel that the second section of the proposition related to parent-child transfer was not transparent, was not communicated, and California Association of Realtors, that was behind promoting the positive aspects of the bill, only communicated the first section, which will advantage them. I feel this is unfair, and I feel it's fraudulent on the part of California Association of Realtors, and I am desperately requesting that the second section related to parent-child transfer be reconsidered to be eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we'll go to the line of Sarah Shaw. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for allowing the public to comment on this. I do understand the role of the Board of Equalization as interpreting and making implementation rules. However, I'd like to really thank Board Members Cohen and Board Member Gaines for acknowledging the fact that this poorly written proposition is really kind of snuck in under the conditions of COVID-19, really. I happen to have transferred yesterday a property that was conserved by my grandparents and transferred to my father and now to me. Thank goodness I had read enough that I could conduct this transfer in advance. I saw many families that were crying in line at the recorder's office. This has caused a really undue and horrific amount of stress on California middle class and working class families. And I also would like to say that this goes beyond homeowners. I was unable to get my full comment in about how this will affect tenants. You know, here we are, we're in a housing crisis. And contrary to what the California Realtors Association may think, tenants cannot afford to go out and buy a home, okay? We have a chronic low inventory. This proposition actually deliberately goes against a lot of things that cities are doing in order to actually allow multi-usage living situations whereby you have a primary residence and maybe you redo a studio above your garage and you rent that out. Well, under Prop 19, that could then cause a risk for the property to be reassessed. So this is going to really have terrible impacts on our already beleaguered tenant population. And I just, again, really want to thank Board Member Gaines and thank my board member, Molly Cohen, for their acknowledgement of the terrible suffering that this proposition has imposed on California families. And I'm going to do everything I can to support a legislative constitutional amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you wish to make a comment, please press 1 and then 0 at this time. And next we'll go to the line of Mary Ann. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have such. I first of all want to thank Mrs. Cohen for all the work she's done for my district here. Mrs. Cohen, your office is also wonderful too. I just want to let you know that. However, as everybody knows, this Proposition 19 is bad policy, and everyone knows it. Only the state wins. All inherited property we're all at a total disadvantage, okay? And as far as I'm concerned, there is no help really coming unless we basically put back Proposition 58. It's hurting too many people, and as the lady just said before me, people are crying. But I have an idea, just real quick. Instead of taxing it at market value, and the state would still get some money, possibly maybe only taxing when you transfer property or inheritance property, maybe 2 to 5% of the assessed value. Therefore, the state would still be getting some money, but not getting 700% of the market value, which no one can afford. So it hurts the middle class for sure. It hurts anybody that is trying to either buy a house or trying to even keep their property. And I have that's one idea. The other thing I want to say is this. It was so fraudulently done by the advertisers is how many beachfront property owners are there in the state of California that has given it to their children? How many people out of state are investing in California real estate? None of that was disclosed. What are the numbers? The numbers are not there, so we don't know. But they just put that out there. Oh, well, we have all these beachfront property people that are movie stars, and they're not paying their fair share, and they gave it to their children, blah, blah, blah. They were doing it within the law, by the way, because Proposition 58 truly, truly needs to be reinstated. It's not helping anybody keep their property. And as far as I'm concerned, the middle class, the only thing they really have of any wealth is their property. I've worked myself to death to save my property for my 3 children. And by the way, one of my children are in a nursing home right now, in a care home, because he had a stroke. And that property and my trust is there to take care of him also. Now, here's the problem. We're either going to give government total power to control all of our lives, control our wealth in our property, and then we're going to ask government to take care of us. I don't think that's the American dream. I don't think that's the American way. I think we have freedom here in this country, and not only that, people come here from all countries in order to buy property, in order to start a business and stuff. We're killing that American dream by these stupid propositions and the stupid, narrow
Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller. Your time is up.
Thank you. And I have no further comments in queue at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, if you would please call the next item.
The next item is M1B, update on the proposed draft legislation associated with the implementation of Proposition 19, presented by Ms. Fleming, Mr. Ernest Dronenberg, and Mr. Jeff Prang.
Excuse
Good morning,
me,
members.
Chair Vasquez?
Yes, Member Gaines, go ahead.
I just, can I comment on this section before we move on to the next one?
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to, there was a question, an attorney asked a question in reference to title changes, which I thought is a great question, and that is, must the property be recorded prior to February 16th? I mean, we've got all sorts of challenges as a result of COVID, and if title is changed prior to the trigger date of the 16th, it seems to me that should stand, regardless of whether that has been recorded or not. I'm wondering if Richard Moon could speak to that, and what is our answer? What is the solution for a county that may not be able to turn that around quickly enough?
Mr. Gaines, this is Richard Moon from the legal department again. There is an existing property tax rule that states that the recording date is rebuttably presumed to be the change in ownership date. And what that means is that if there's other evidence that the transfer was done on some other date, then the assessor should accept that other evidence. So there's no particular reason why an assessor absolutely must abide by that recording date. And I am aware that there are at least some counties that are not considering the change in ownership date only by the recording date.
Oh, that is great. And we're kind of running out of time, but I don't know if that could be posted on our website or not today. And we've got a few more days here for folks.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the website, but I do know that in our guidance, again, which you'll hear about in the guidance section of this meeting, we are planning to have a question and answer regarding that topic.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I know Ms. Flemings and Mr. Dronenberg and Mr. Prang are on the line and are ready to move forward with this. And first and foremost, I wanted to thank especially the president, Mr. Ernest Dronenberg, and my assessor, Jeff Prang, for all their work these last couple of weeks. You know, it seems like we've been meeting just about every day trying to get this thing to move, and they know how difficult it's been. And I really appreciate the time you've put in, especially the work, the late hours that you've done. And I know a couple of you've even been on some Zoom calls with us over the weekend. So I really appreciate all the time and energy you've put into this. But with that, let me have Ms. Fleming begin her presentation, and then I believe she'll introduce Mr. Dronenberg and then Mr. Prang.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable members, Brenda Fleming, Executive Director. Today, I'll provide an update on the proposed draft legislation designed to implement Proposition 19. Joining me, as you've noted, for this discussion is the Honorable Ernie Dronenberg, President of California Assessors Association and San Diego County Assessor Recorder Clerk. Also, the Honorable Jeffrey Prang, Chair of CAA's Legislative Committee and Los Angeles County Assessor. I want to thank them both for their active participation and collaboration with us as we are focused on ensuring that this legislation is operative on the 16th. If I may, members, allow me to briefly summarize what we've accomplished to date since our last meeting and where we stand today. In November of 2020, first, we established strike teams, if you recall, comprised of both BOE and CAA staff for the purpose of expediently and efficiently identifying the gaps and ambiguities in Proposition 19, as you've noted and discussed today, and also to prepare the path forward for the successful implementation of this legislation. At the January 2021 meeting, you approved, members, the proposed draft legislation to implement Proposition 19 and directed that I send a copy of the draft legislation to the state legislature. Your direction, members, was effective in that the material was sent to the legislative leadership, and that opened the doors to many important conversations that we've had over the last few weeks with legislative leadership, the tax policy and budget committees, and then potential authors. It's been really an active, very full, comprehensive discussion, both the breadth and the depth of discussions have occurred. It's a complex piece of legislation, and the conversations have been very helpful. As you can appreciate, members, though, the legislative process is fluid and very dynamic, even more so during this COVID-19 pandemic, and even more so with the governor identifying some urgency priorities for the legislature and the executive branch. However, we've still been actively engaged with the legislature to address the gaps, to clarify and respond to the technical and policy-related matters needed for the legislation. As we've noted, Prop 19 has a lot of lack of clarity and ambiguities, and our role is to make sure that we're informing and educating the legislature on where those gaps exist with existing law and where there are conflicts or it's just silent. Every interaction to date has given us the opportunity to continue that education, and I want to just speak to some of the important issues there. Some of the issues that are important to clarify through this process is the filing requirements, the time frame for taxpayers to file for base year value transfers, as currently these time limits are not defined. Clarification on what constitutes a family farm, and these are just examples. Eligibility for the parent-child and grandparent-grandchild exclusions. The process members and the interactions are consistent with how we, as an agency, typically work with the legislature to implement new legislation, again, engaging in the technical aspects of the discussion. Noting that our job is to just continue to make sure that as we support the legislature to make sure that we have actually implemented legislation that we can administer efficiently and effectively. At this point in time, members, we are optimistic that we may see a bill introduced either tomorrow, February 12th, or at latest Tuesday, February 16th. We'll continue these conversations, but it looks like we have an opportunity to get a bill introduced then. Once a bill is introduced, of course, members will review and analyze the actual impacts. What we're waiting for at this point is to see the bill introduced, to see the actual language, and then we'll review that to determine the impacts. We, of course, will keep you informed as soon as we get it, and then can have definitely more conversation at the February 23rd meeting. Our hope is that the proposed legislation or the introduced legislation is going to align with what we're looking for. But as we're waiting, since there is a measure of uncertainty and material that's unknown at this time, what we're considering is two possible scenarios. The first scenario is if the legislature introduces the bill and enacts it by February 16th, then we're prepared to operationalize the administration of Prop 19 on February 16th. So what do I mean by operationalize? Basically, in the short term, we have created 7 new forms for county assessors to use, and we've updated our website regarding the latest information on Prop 19. We will begin the emergency rulemaking process, promulgate rules, and continue to issue guidance in the form of letters to assessors and county assessors only letters. In the long term, based upon the scenario that the implementation legislation is enacted, we'll examine and update assessors' handbooks, annotations, publications, and other guidance materials, and that's just to name a few. We will also continue the communications plans to continue with our education and outreach work and to make sure that our taxpayers' rights advocate office is prepared to assist taxpayers. In addition, discussion on Proposition 19 has up to this point mostly been under public policy. We'll continue to look at how we address it under public policy. I think it's going to be important to continue to, as you've indicated today, to engage with the public and other interested parties and stakeholders on what's next, even after we get this initial legislation. The second scenario is if we don't get the legislation passed in time, and it's not enacted by February 16th, as we are hoping, we are still responsible for the legislation that still takes effect on February 16th. So we will just continue then to proceed with administration of the law. We will use the rulemaking process. It may take a little longer if we don't get the authority, specific authority for the emergency rulemaking process. But we will still need to continue, as we've discussed earlier, with the rulemaking process, and staff will give you more detail on that in the upcoming discussion. Again, we're still responsible for fulfilling our duties to support the county assessors. We'll continue to issue guidance to ensure statewide uniformity and consistency. And in this scenario, if we, again, don't get legislation enacted by Tuesday the 16th, we'll go back to the table with the legislature. We still have to push. We still have to make sure that work is getting done. And if that means additional legislation going through later iterations than we'd like, we still have to go back to the table with the legislature. As you're hearing, there's still more work to be done. To conclude, members, and because we'll open it up to questions because a number of staff will get involved, we just want to acknowledge again that we do have some things to celebrate about this, even with the tough legislation. And just a little bit of some highlights of what the staff have accomplished. We have issued 2 LTAs on Proposition 19, including one for the 7 new forms that county assessors will need to implement Prop 19. We also have expanded many resources and information for our taxpayers on the website. We've answered literally hundreds of questions by phone, email, letter, and faxes to assist taxpayer questions on Prop 19. And again, I just want to thank the staff for the amazing superhero work that they've been doing over the last few weeks. Again, we're responsible for implementing the legislation, and we're fully focused on making sure that work is done. And if I may, at this point, I'll turn it over to Assessor Dronenberg next, unless members, there are any questions for my part of the presentation.
I see 2 hands. Let me go with Member Gaines was up first, and then Member Cohen. Go ahead, Member Gaines. I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
I want to thank Director Fleming for your presentation. I really appreciate it, and appreciate the activity of BOE staff to work on these LTA letters and be responsive. I did have a specific question, though, in terms of bill introduction on the timing. Do you think we can get a rushed bill through prior to the 16th? I just, the 16th is a holiday, I believe, isn't it? Isn't that? So we've got
Monday the 15th.
Is that President's Day?
Monday the 15th is the State House. Monday the 15th.
The 15th is, okay. All right. So
yes, sir.
Do you think that someone, and I don't even know who the legislator is, but maybe can you expand on that a little bit? And is it going through with urgency so that they could conceivably get it done in that timeline, or are we really looking at a longer timeline to move it through?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Our focus in our push, aggressive push, quite frankly, has been the legislation focused primarily initially the provisions for the provisions for February 16th. And by doing so, we've asked for a tax levy clause to be inserted in there, which supports the urgency. And just in all of the discussions, we've reiterated multiple times the necessity to have it ready to go by the 16th. So again, the goal would be to have it introduced by tomorrow. It gets a little strange if it happens on Tuesday, because that would be some significant work legislative process-wise, to do an introduction and go through the whole process of getting it introduced, discussed, voted upon, and then ideally enrolled on the same day. But we've had those conversations, and so, at this point, we just continue to push aggressively for it. But there is a measure of, having handshakes with parties in the legislature and trusting that they too appreciate the necessity to get this done by the 16th.
Okay. Now, is this happening through leadership? It must be.
Yes, sir. Through just about anybody and everybody there in the legislature. Yes, sir.
Well, that's very encouraging. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Member Cohen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Ms. Fleming. I have a question. So based on where we find ourselves today, meaning that there's no bill introduced or acted on, or an action signed by the governor or even a sponsor, there's, it's just kind of a vision, and we're hoping something will happen. What exposure are we placing on the agency? And when I'm talking about exposure, I'm talking about our responsibility to taxpayers, our responsibility to assessors. Are we opening ourselves up to litigation? I fear that the taxpayers' rights are not being protected. I am very sensitive to assessors not having direction or guidance. I also want to acknowledge and applaud every one of your staff members. Richard Moon has been just incredible in answering these questions. I know I personally called on him to do Zoom calls and with me on the last minute, and he's been gracious and they stepped up. So I'm grateful for that. So back to my original question, what's the exposure? And then my second part of that question is, what do you need from us as board members to help push this along?
Thank you.
Vice Chair Schaefer here. I disagree with Member Cohen, my esteemed colleague, on all the exposure. We are working hand in hand with the assessors. The assessors have all the forms available. We're doing all that can be humanly possible to reach out and to help. And I'd like to hear from Mr. Dronenberg on Ms. Cohen's comments.
Well, before we hear from Mr. Dronenberg, I'd like my question to be answered from Ms. Fleming, and then I would love to hear from Mr. Dronenberg.
Ms. Fleming.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen, for your comments. So first of all, what is our exposure? Let me speak to it from a perspective of what our responsibility is. So when legislation becomes operative, and in this case we have two operative dates, as you've indicated, February 16th and April 1st. So our job, once legislation is passed, is to administer the provisions that are stated in the law. In this case, the provisions that are there are, in many cases, they're just unclear or just not fully thought out, or in many cases have some conflicts with existing law. Because we are very fortunate to have amazing staff, and in our deep decades, of experience in this area, we do have the subject matter expertise to be able to make interpretations of what it means. And so a lot of what you're referring to in terms of the staff work is they go through and do a full examination and vetting of what the proposition language says, specifically how it lines up with other propositions, prior propositions, existing law, rules, et cetera, et cetera. So they fully examine that material, which they've been doing, to come to a conclusion or an interpretation. But again, that interpretation is not just sort of an informed guess. It is well thought out, seasoned, experienced knowledge and legal expertise. So our exposure from that perspective is not really the concern for me at this point in terms of the exposure to litigation, et cetera. We certainly there is some percentage or some opportunities for someone to challenge us. But again, at this point, as if I may, as the state's experts on property tax, we do have a certain amount of authority and absolute authority for a number of areas of this in the Constitution and by statute in other areas of the law. So I think, from my perspective, Ms. Cohen, I think we can't be remiss in our duties. We can't fail to move forward with the law. And I think as to the extent that we are doing that, then we are in effect, ma'am, doing our jobs. And that we will just continue to push forward to the legislature like we do on even on prior legislation that's passed over the years and decades. Whenever there is still outstanding matters that need to be clarified, we just continue to push to get the additional legislation that's needed. So your second question, ma'am, in terms of, what can you do to help us? Just what you're doing. Continue to have the public meetings, continue to engage with the legislators that are nested in your districts, to continue, especially between now and tomorrow, for sure. Work with the legislators in your district and help them to understand, as you've done today, hearing from the taxpayers, the importance of this legislation and the importance of having that clarifying language by Tuesday. Again, we're here to do our jobs, but at the end of the day, whether the 16th is an operative date. And so, internally, that means we go live on Tuesday along with the assessors.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Dronenberg is ready to go. Or Ms. Cohen, are you finished?
I wouldn't address Ms. Cohen's, I'm sorry, question. And as the California Assessors Association president, we believe that one of our major goals is consistency and fairness throughout the state, not just our county, but the whole state. And in that regard, we looked at, remember the package that you approved, in that is certain areas that relate to February 16th. We took those out, and our task force together with the assessors, legal staff in San Luis Obispo, put together a 5-page memo on different parts that are effective on on Tuesday. That was then run by Moon to make sure that it was consistent with him. It had already been passed by the legislature's lobbyists and the consultants to the committees. So this is language that is in a package, hopefully, that will come out. But we distribute it to our assessors, just the assessors, all 58 of them, and they have what we call the guidelines, and those guidelines will then allow us to have a consistent treatment from from the top of the state to the bottom of the state on the implementation of Prop 19 on the 16th. Now, this is just guidelines provided by their association. So there's no underground regulation or anything. We're not hamstrung by regulatory authority on what we can do when we're telling our own members this is what we think path we should follow, so that there's consistency throughout the whole state. And that was done and delivered to them yesterday. So that come Monday, if we don't have a bill, which I'm hoping we do, if we do have a bill, it should be mirror this package. But if it doesn't, at least our assessors will have some kind of guidance, because unlike you, they haven't been, all of them, they trust their association to do the work. All of them don't know what to do, and they're all feeling questions. And so this will give them some guidance, and it also points to the board's of Equalization's website as a point of other information. So that's to answer your question, that's what we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Dronenberg. I actually appreciate that insight. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd like to also hear from the other assessor, Jeff Prang.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Member Cohen, it's great to be with you again today, and I want to acknowledge the format that Assessor Dronenberg has laid out is something we think is very important to provide guidance and consistency to assessors in implementing Prop 19 during this period where there's a great deal of uncertainty. There is, you spoke to the issue of exposure or liability, and just me speaking as the LA County Assessor, I am concerned about that, but I'm also concerned that this measure has been duly enacted by the voters of California. There are deadlines, there are constitutional deadlines that we have to meet. It is, we are hoping that we'll get legislation in the next 72 hours that will deal with components of the measure, but there still is the broader deficiencies in Prop 19 that will be waiting for additional legislation. And we are obligated to implement this whether or not we have the legislation. And I don't think assessors or the BOE should be in a position where we can shrug our shoulders and tell taxpayers that we don't know. There are some things in the measure that I think are pretty obvious. For example, inheriting your parents' property if there's 3 siblings. It's absurd to believe that all the siblings have to move into the property to inherit it, even though that's what the language seems to suggest that it has to be done. So we're not going out on a limb by saying that if one child moves in, they'll qualify, the exemption conditions will be satisfied. There are other issues that might be wobblers. And then there's other issues where I'm recommending that absent legislation, we're going to have to make determinations to help taxpayers. And we're going to have to see how far we can go and get away with it to provide that type of guidance. And it's not inconceivable the way the legislative process works that some of the guidance that we offer will later not be ratified by the legislature. But from my own view is that we have to go as far as we can to provide some sort of guidance to taxpayers. And there is a risk that what we decide may not be in conformance with what the legislature finally decides.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Assessor, from your perspectives, both of you. Assessor Prang, the point that you raised actually is one of my concerns. I mean, before all of this pandemic, we were, you know, your offices were maxed out at capacity. We haven't even begun to talk about AAB, right? And that deadline. I mean, there's, and we haven't talked about, you know, I mean, I understand that different assessors' offices have different resources. I'm sure all assessors could use a few more dollars. So I want to just make sure that assessors have the resources and the direction and the guidance that you need. That is the spirit of my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fleming, do we go? I guess we should have Mr. Dronenberg now make his presentation.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez. I today just wanted to start by reiterating a little bit of what Ms. Fleming said. I've been around this business for over 40 years, and I can't think of better teamwork and more people reaching out, more people going the extra mile to get this done on this crazy timeline. And so I wanted to really call out a couple of people such as Brenda Fleming and the chair and the chairman's staff, Carrie Hammond. She did so much reaching out. Everything happens in this legislative process, it seems like, after 5, and that's when people start calling each other, and that's when people say, oh, okay, I'll do this. And it was all done, and the quarterback was our lobbyist, Rob Grosskosser, and he did a fantastic job, and is still doing a fantastic job. If this thing is pulled off, and to answer Board Member Gaines's question, the Hail Mary on this is a trailer bill. You asked about deadlines and process and the time. This is headed, if it's to happen, it's going to happen in a trailer bill with a tax clause in it that it becomes effective and passed really quick. I agree that getting it all done by Tuesday would really be something else, but I think the vehicles are in line, the process is in line. It's taken us too long, but at least it's here. That if we need to give guidance, and it'll be, my guess is it might not be on the 16th, but it'll be shortly thereafter if things go as correctly. I also wanted to comment on Assessor Larry Stone's. He had over 1,500 people on his call, and Malia was on his call and did a good job. And Carmen Chu did a call, and hers was good. And then Vice Chairman Schaefer, he mentioned his call. We had 4 county assessors on his call and over 1,000 people. An example of some of the things that, you know, we're hopefully completing by Tuesday. We've all discussed, but there's an example of something that's not clear, and it's going to take the legislature to cut the baby in half, is that the Prop 19 said you had 2 years to replace your house if a fire causes. And yet right now you have 5 years. Now, if you can, I know in San Diego County, if you're going to try to replace a house and get it through just the permitting process, it's going to take you 2 years, much less the finance and the construction time. So, but the legislature, and we've had help from legislative councils, they're believing that that's not necessarily the case, but that's what's written. And that's an example of what's really bad that we have to change in this or interpret out through other sections. So just thank you for all the help that this joint effort has had. And that's my comments. And I wanted to turn the technical part off to my colleague from the Los Angeles area, the great assessor, Jeffrey Prime.
Thank you, Assessor Dronenberg. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable board members. I'm delighted to be with you again to provide an update on the progress that we've made since the last time I spoke with you as a group. I also want to add my voice in appreciation to board members and staff for developing the partnership we have over the last couple of months to try to work together to identify a pathway to fix the deficiencies that will allow us to fairly and equitably administer Proposition 19. I'm grateful to be able to work with each one of you and your staff, and the voters have duly enacted this law, and we are obligated as public servants to find a way to implement it, to identify the deficiencies, and do our best to correct those. I did also, just as an aside, in my capacity as the LA County Assessor, want to say that I appreciate the very well-reasoned remarks that Member Cohen made in her introductory statements, and I wish to associate myself with those. I agree that a constitutional amendment is needed to reverse the very regressive elements of Prop 19 that disproportionately affect working people and middle-income people. That's not the Assessors Association speaking, that's just me. However, as chairman of the Legislative Committee, I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the steps that we have taken thus far. We have, the last time we discussed, had a conversation with one another, I discussed the leadership and guidance provided by the board and collaboration with the California Assessors Association, which has been critical in positioning us to a point where we can hopefully make certain that our constituents are informed and treated fairly and equitably to the extent possible. Because of the pandemic, nothing has really gone by the book. It's not been easy. The legislation we proposed has felt the effects of those conditions. We have engaged with and worked collaboratively with CAL FIRE, with the California State Association of Counties, with the California Association of Realtors and the Farm Bureau, amongst others. As I believe was stated and implied by Brenda Fleming, we are anticipating that a version of some of the provisions of our proposed legislation relative to intergenerational transfer will be introduced no later than noon tomorrow. Although, as has been stated, the legislative process is fluid and full of uncertainty, and we have seen hard and fast deadlines come and go over the course of the last couple of weeks, and are still in a position where we're making progress. Just as a recap, we introduced a comprehensive legislative package intended to address as many deficiencies in Prop 19 as we could. We were instructed by legislative staff that a comprehensive policy package was not appropriate for the budgetary trailer bill process. They asked us to narrow it down, so we narrowed that bill down to legislation that was focused on the must-have interpretations to meet the February 16th intergenerational transfer deadline. As all of you know, the legislature has many rules. One of them is that a bill must be in print for 72 hours before it can be voted upon. This timeline, coupled with the conversations board members, assessors, and other stakeholders are having with members of the legislature, still gives us relative confidence, and let me emphasize relative, that we will see a bill that is able to be passed by both chambers of the legislature and signed by the governor on February 16th. But it is perilously close, and none of us are feeling very comfortable at the moment. We do not anticipate that the comprehensive legislative package we propose will be returned and passed in full. We have been advised that there's a strong possibility that the legislative guidance that we must have for the February 16th deadline will be written into this bill. Having some familiarity with the legislature, I can assure you that the best laid plans often go awry, and it's a possibility that the Assessors Association and Board of Equalization language is coupled with other language from other stakeholders. And we're monitoring that very closely to ensure that any variations are within our acceptable parameters. And we've been admonished several times, and we're adhering to this admonishment that we're not willing to give up the good in expectations of the perfect. That being said, regardless of what bill is actually introduced to be voted on, assessors are required to start administering Prop 19 on Tuesday. And I can assure you that that I and the 57 other assessors of mine intend to administer Prop 19 in a uniform manner and to the degree that is practicable, and that we have guidance to do so within in accordance with the law and the intent of Proposition 19. Fundamentally, assessors were obligated to administer the law, not make the law. We don't even necessarily interpret the law. Prop 19 becomes operative on the 16th. We're aware of the issues and concerns that the law does not make clear, and we're hoping that we can provide clarity by that date. But even without it, we're going to do something to provide some support for members of the public. I want to end by echoing some of the previous comments by board members. Obviously, the Prop 19 implementation deadline was extremely aggressive, and we've made astronomical progress in identifying issues, interpreting the language, writing legislation, educating lawmakers, as well as speaking to literally thousands of taxpayers, realtors on the deficiencies of the measure and the needed corrections. Everyone involved here, I believe, should be applauded for the efforts that we've made together, and feel proud of what we've accomplished in such a short time period, despite the fact that we're not quite at the finish line. To some extent, we are the victims of circumstance. This is not normal times, but that same context, to be where we are on the cusp of passing legislation, legislation which I believe represents the most significant change to Proposition 13 that has been adopted, really represents a significant feat. I know that those words may mean nothing to those who are affected or about to be affected by change in property tax administration. And for that, I can only offer you the fact that we are here. We're trying under very difficult circumstances, doing our very best that we can to operate the law and to provide clear guidance and answers. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you for inviting me to be with you to provide an update today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you. Thank you both. Members, do we have any questions? Either of our assessors who are on the line. I don't know if that's an old hand from Member Cohen, but hearing and seeing none, I would just like to thank you, especially once again, both of you, for your time and energy on this. I know it feels like we've been seeing each other just about every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks now. But I feel pretty confident, and now we're just waiting. Hopefully that we can get some the leadership who we've actually had an opportunity to interact with to step up and take this forward, either by tomorrow or Tuesday. So with that, let me just ask Ms. Taylor to check and see if there's any public comment on this.
Thank you. We have 2 written comments. And actually, they're from the same person, so they'll be combined into one, from Fariel Magami. Proposed legislation is promoted only the benefits part of, with no mention of a huge tax impact upon change of ownership. While for seniors, I am 68, it offers an opportunity to sell existing residence and buy another, transferring the base taxes of the current residence. It then take it all and more by requiring the inheritance children to pay market value taxes at the time of change in ownership, with an exception that is hardly realistic. I worked hard and honest all my life as a healthcare professional. Unlike those dishonest people who were in the highest office, paid my taxes. I bought a house, and it is my major asset, which is the only thing I can live for my daughters. One daughter is severely ill and unable to work. The elimination of the parent-child transfer and addition of taxes is unconscionable and unfair. Please reverse this to where it was under Proposition 13 and 58. This Proposition 19 was advertised and is named as the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled Families, and Victims of Wildfire or Natural Disasters Act, without transparencies related to its rather negative impact that is apparent to child transfer. Me and many parents in my position feel very strongly that this section of the proposition was purposefully and fraudulently kept under covers so that interest groups such as CARE could promote and part that is to their advantage. As such, we request that the section related to the parent-child transfer be eliminated or revised. Thank you. AT&T moderator, we will now take public comment. Each caller will have up to 3 minutes to speak. For the record, we request that the callers provide their name. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment regarding this matter?
Thank you. If you wish to make a comment, please press 1 and then 0 at this time. And first we'll go to the line of Marianne. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to just say one thing about all of you. I think you're all doing the work of the legislator. I think it is crazy time, but only because the legislators did not do their duty. So therefore, the Board of Equalization, the assessors and tax lawyers and everybody else is having to do the legislator's job. I also believe in the state of California, we have no real representation. This particular Proposition 19 never should have been through the legislator at all. It was rushed through. It was, and the legislator missed many policy and legal issues that would have been uncovered had the amendment gone through the regular and more extensive public review process, which it did not. So even though the Board of Equalization and the assessors don't want to be legislators, basically that's what you people are doing. You are fixing what the legislator did not do. So as far as I'm concerned, in this state, we have the public really has no representation. The way the proposition was done to the voters was underhanded, prejudiced, and unconstitutional because you're pitting the fire victims against the inherited property people, and it's still to this day unclear. And when you see people crying at trying to find a lawyer, trying to get their affairs in order, they just don't have the time nor the money to do it under the stress. Also, I'd like to ask all of you one other thing that I read. During a health crisis, it's unconstitutional in my small reading that you are not supposed to pass any laws or anything or any initiative during a health crisis, which we have been in since March. So I don't understand why that health issue is not put in there to look at the whole issue. All of us are under enormous amount of stress, but my hat is off to the Board of Equalization and all you people that are trying to be legislators and trying to interpret a very bad law and a very bad policy. All I could say is this state really does need real representation. Also, one more factor, the way the propositions are written is unfair, unclear, and they continue to mislead the public and the voters. And I also have another thing to say if I have a little bit more time here, and that is this particular, we have 40 million people here in the state of California, and 55% of them would be 22 million voters. Of the 22 million voters that could have voted, only 327,000 passed, as you know, which really means only 1.48% of the California registered voters decided on Proposition 19. That means 1%.
Caller, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll go to the line of Sarah Shaw. Please go ahead.
Hi, I have a question rather than a comment for the board. I'm just curious, and I don't know if I should address this question directly to Mr. Cronenberg or Mr. Ronenberg. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Who is the chair of the legislative committee tasked with implementing Prop 19? Just a a question for me so that I can, address a public comment to them, pose my plight to them, and in the hopes that they'll consider that when working with the legislative committee.
I would address your comments to the chair of the Board of Equalization, and you can copy. You can copy me on it if you feel like that's going to be an advantage. But I would suggest the Honorable Anthony Vasquez, Chair of the Board of Equalization, to address your comments.
Thank you.
And if I may, members, this is Brenda Fleming, and thank you, taxpayer, for weighing in. You can also address it to the legislature in whose district you reside.
Yes, I believe that would be Assemblymember Stone and Mr. Laird. I was just wondering if there was another particular chairperson who is overseeing the legislative intent and so on that you're currently working with. That was really my specific question.
And noted, and again, in the Senate, you can address it to Senate Gov and Finance, also to the budget committees, and similarly in the Assembly to Assembly Rev and Tax or Assembly budget committees also. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next we'll go to the line of Mikhail. Please go ahead.
Hi. My question is in regard to the deadlines for Prop 19. So I'm with my family. We're trying to file paperwork, and there's like the February 12th effective deadline because the 15th is a holiday. And so we're trying to figure out, does that mean that the deed needs to be transferred on that date? Does that mean that all the supplemental paperwork needs to be transferred on that date, like the preliminary change of ownership, the change of ownership? There's a whole bunch of different documents. What happens if it's submitted, say, today, and then the assessor's office is really backed up, and then it doesn't get processed until, Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're just trying to figure out when they say that everything needs to be in by the deadline, what specific document needs to be in, and then what happens if the assessor's offices themselves are backed up through no fault of our own. And if somebody could help me understand where to look for that information, or if there's any guidance, that would be super helpful. Thank you.
Well, I would suggest that Richard Moon would be the best person to answer this question, to look for statewide. Because some assessors are, and I'd say the vast majority of the assessors are allowing the recorded, not necessarily the recording, but the notarizing of the documents to be the date that it's acceptable. But Ms. Fleming, maybe you could ask Richard to answer.
Yeah, Richard Moon's on the line with us, but also Dave Young is available to assist with that question. Gentlemen, whoever's available on mic.
Yes, good morning. This is David Young from the Property Tax Department, and I'm the Deputy Director. What I would recommend is you go ahead and get as much of the paperwork as you can complete as possible today and tomorrow. We do have a property tax rule. It is Property Tax Rule 462.260, and it does talk about the recording date being the actual date. It's rebuttably presumed to be the date of the transfer, but there are provisions that Mr. Moon already talked about that you can rebut that presumption if there is either a contract or a signature on the deed or something else that would be evidence that would be compelling to the assessor that the transfer indeed happened at a different date, an earlier date. They are able to use that as the date of the actual transfer. So if you're trying to make it before the deadline of the 12th, actually it's the 16th, then that is one way in which you can do it. Of course, the most sure way is to complete as much of it as possible.
Thank you.
I will, if you are looking for extra information, we do have it on our website. our website is BOE, www.boe.ca.gov. There is information on Prop 19 on there. We do address the issue of at what date does the transaction is effective. It is actually, we do address it in the Chief Counsel memo dated January 1, January 8th of 2021. So it is in there, and I believe if it's not addressed directly in some of our guidance online, I will have an update on my following presentation on guidance on that too. So, Mr. Moon,
Wonderful.
if you care to add anything, if not, that's my best advice, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
This is Richard Moon. I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, was that it for the public comment?
I do have one more over the phone from Yelena. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Yelena, and I have 2 comments. One is I transfer my 2 property, one is for my son, one for my daughter, to Irrevocable Trust. And now my comment is, did I lose now the good side of Proposition 19 because I'm not own this house anymore? So did I lose it forever? It's first thing. And second thing, all assessor forms like PCOR, they have only one option to check yes, gift, trust, or other. So if I check yes to gift, I might lose my understanding on step up on my death for my children. But if I do not check yes, then I'm still filing a claim for exclusion now. So how I can reconcile these 2 different things? It's again, I move my houses based on the current Proposition 19 to Irrevocable Trust, one house directly to my primary beneficiary, my daughter, and another one, a rental property, directly to my primary beneficiary, my son. So I'm filing PCOR, and I don't know, should I check yes to gift? Should I check yes to trust? Should I check yes to others? Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a question we can answer, David or Richard?
Mr. Chair, this is Richard Moon. There's a lot of facts going on in what she said, and my suggestion would be that she, after the meeting, contact either our property taxes department or our taxpayer rights advocate, and they will be able to help her a little bit more.
Thank you. And like I mentioned in my opening remarks, for many of you in the public, as you're asking these questions, I would also double check with your practitioner or your attorney, whoever you may feel comfortable with, just to be sure.
Just a clarification, if I could, Chair Vasquez.
Yes, Member Gaines, go ahead.
Could we publicly provide the phone number for that lady that had the question about the trust and the transfer of property, just so she knows who to call? It sounds like it's the property department. Is that correct? And then if we could provide a phone number.
Yes, this is David Young again. Let me give you that number. It's 1-916. Bear with me for 1 second. I'm looking it up right now, so you'll have to bear with me.
Sure.
Let me. Oh, now I'm locked out of my computer. Please let me get that for you later on today, and I will provide it publicly.
That's great.
So,
And then
members, this is Brenda Fleming. If I may offer something. So, and we do absolutely want to assist the taxpayers. If you don't mind, for the taxpayers, if we are providing significant information on our website. So if it's at all possible to have you go to the website, we'll make sure that there's not only Q&A there for you, but if you want to reach us, then the phone numbers for how to reach us directly for more direct conversation, that information is also on our website. That might be the more prudent way to do it versus being on public mic offering that phone number. So again, I'll thank you for your calls. We do want to assist, but if we could direct you to our website, which has email addresses for the Taxpayer Rights Advocate's Office and the public number for our Property Tax Department. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
If I could I just reiterate a little bit, because if there is a question where they're trying to get a fast answer, I want to make sure that our constituents have the ability to get in touch with someone, because we are coming up upon a deadline here on Friday. So do we have phone numbers on the website?
Yes, sir, we do. And also, Member Gaines, they can also, if like we've been doing, they can also reach out to each of your offices individually, clarify it a little bit more, and then that information can be forwarded to us also.
Right, I was gonna.
That would be very helpful, members, for you to assist us with taking these taxpayer calls. And that way we also have a connection between your offices and the taxpayers is also very helpful.
Yeah, so that number, those numbers should be on the website for each of us in our own offices, correct?
That is correct, sir, yes.
Good, I just wanted to make sure people knew that they can get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a couple hands now. Ms. Stowers was up first, then I see Member Cohen, and then Vice Chair Schaefer. Go ahead, Ms. Stowers.
Thank you, Chairman Vasquez. I've just been listening to a lot of the questions that our constituents have, and one of the common themes is dealing with the change in ownership and whether you have to have a recorded deed, and the fact that February 15th is a holiday and the effective date is February 16th. I believe staff has cited a couple of property tax rules that explain it. Property tax rule 462-260 and 462-001. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we can push those two property tax rules up front on our website under our frequently asked questions, so that hopefully taxpayers will have some relief and understanding on how it's working.
Good recommendation. Member Cohen? Was that a hand still, or was that an old one?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Man, I'm loving this conversation. I love having the interactions with the taxpayers. It's a really incredible, stressful and difficult time, I recognize. So I'm honored to be able to step up and help in any and every way. A couple things I heard to the taxpayer that called and asked questions about to whom she should write her letters to. Specifically, I just want to reiterate what Ms. Fleming said. You want to direct your letters to Senator Mike McGuire. He is the chair of the Budget Committee subcommittee on the Senate side, and you want to write a letter to Assemblywoman Autumn Burke. She is chair of a committee called Revenue and Taxation. Both of these two individuals need to hear from every member of the public about their concerns. Please flood their office with your thoughts, your concerns, your frustrations. Don't hold back. It's very important that we get this documented and on the record so they know the seriousness. These two individuals are leading the discussion on tax issues as it pertains to Proposition 19, but tax issues period, but specifically to Prop 19. So I want to highlight Mike McGuire and Autumn Burke. These are the leadership in the legislature, okay? As you heard, unfortunately, the Board of Equalization, we don't have the authority to make policy. We have the rulemaking authority as it relates to assessors, but we work in partnership with the legislature and with the governor's office. And so we are actively inputting everything that we hear from you on these calls into the legislature leadership. I want to go back to an item and a topic that was discussed earlier. I might have missed it. Let me see here. Hold on. Let me look at my notes. Is it possible to have a summary of what we may be expecting in the proposed legislation? So this is my question to Board of Equalization staff and also to the assessors on the call. I was wondering if we could get a summary of what you guys are expecting to see in the legislation. Perhaps you can discuss it with us, and then your staff members can follow up by emailing it to us. I just think it's important that the members of the public understand what we're talking about. We say, oh, we've got 40 amendments that's being considered, but we don't ever talk about what expressly is being considered. So if we could touch on that, I would appreciate that, or at least we can discuss the key components that we're advocating for, that we see in the either the trailing legislation or the implementation legislation. I just want to make sure that we're completely transparent and we're putting laser focus on exactly where our asks are. So, and then the telephone number for the legislature is area code 916-274-3350. Area code 916-274-3350. Okay, thank you. Those are my remarks for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Schaefer.
Well, wait, hold on. I mean, I'd like to a response before you brush over my request to Vice Schaefer. I want to know a summary of what we expect to see in the proposed legislation. So I don't know who the best person is qualified. I don't know if it's Richard Moon. I don't know if it's Brenda Fleming or one of my assessors that are on this call, but if someone could step up and share with me a summary of what is being currently worked on in the legislature, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Member Cohen, this is Chief Counsel Henry Nanjo. I just wanted to make a correction for the audience that's listening in. The number you gave was not for the legislature. That was, I believe, the BOE Property Tax Department's number. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nanjo.
And Member Cohen, not to brush over what you just stated, but can you kind of hold that until the end? Because I think some of that might come up in our later discussions on some of these items, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. I've got it in my notes. I'll reiterate it if I don't get an answer. And the taxpayer was asking for the BOE property tax number. So that I'm sorry, I was giving the property tax number, but I did say the legislature. So Mr. Nanjo, I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. And again, ladies and gentlemen, that number that I gave is for the property tax division within the State Board of Equalization.
Correct. All right, Vice Chair Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair Vasquez. Our office is available to assist anybody in District 4, which is the 5 southern counties. My district office is at 619-946-3791. And my email is mike.schaefer@boe.ca.gov. Ms. Ferial Magami, who spoke to us, gave us her phone number and her email both. She's in my district in Orange County, and I appreciate her making a presentation. In fact, 2 presentations combined into one. I don't know that we can reverse the matters to make it like it was under Prop 13 and 58, but since we do have her phone number and her email, I would hope that somebody on staff might send her an observation or comment on behalf of Vice Chair Schaefer, so she knows that, the gears are turning. And also, I'd like to comment if anyone is going to inquire of or send information to Senator McGuire or Assemblywoman Burke, as Ms. Cohen has suggested, that you mention that it's on referral of Member Cohen of the BOE, because if you're not in the particular district of those legislators, they may not get around to you until they take care of everybody in their district, and you're entitled to equal attention from them when a member of the BOE suggests that there's an issue that requires their attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, before we wrap up this item, I just wanted to once again thank Ms. Fleming, Mr. Prang, and Mr. Dronenberg for their input and their participation on this item. And hopefully we'll be able to produce more written guidance on these issues, especially on the parent-child exclusion as a BOE priority moving forward. But I believe Ms. Fleming still had another comment on this item before we move on. Is Ms. Fleming available?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. So members, I just wanted to follow up, in terms of the scenarios of the legislative timeframe. If the legislature, if we get legislation introduced tomorrow, either later today or tomorrow, what I would like to do is request your approval to allow me to draft a letter of support or opposition, depending on what's in the legislation. Once we see it, staff will do a full examination and review of it to see how well it aligns with what we're doing. I absolutely will keep you informed, but in order to send a letter of support or opposition as appropriate, I would request your permission and approval to draft that letter under my signature on behalf of the board.
Are the members comfortable with that?
Deputy Controller Stowers here.
Yes.
This is a question of process, because I can imagine this, I cannot remember. Do we normally, Ms. Fleming, have the executive director send a letter of support for legislation that the BOE is basically sponsoring? Or would we normally have the executive director, the chair send the letter under his signature? I can't remember which direction we go.
Understand, and we've had both. We've used both approaches before, so we can go either way. Our goal would be, if we want to make sure that the legislature understands that we support or oppose something, I'm looking for the approach to make that happen. So we certainly can have it drafted from the chairman on behalf of the board, or I can send it on behalf of the board. It's the member's pleasure.
Members, if you're comfortable, I don't mind working with our executive director, and it would obviously be a consensus that we both agree on this, because I know the urgency, especially if we don't hear back until Tuesday. I mean, we basically got to move everything very fast if it's a Tuesday turnaround time. I see a hand up from Member Gaines, and you probably know the process better than all of us, being a former senator.
Oh, I just want to respond to your question. I think that would be fine, Chair Vasquez, with you and Executive Director Fleming working together on that letter. So from my perspective, thank you. Please move forward.
Thank you. Is everybody else comfortable with that? All the other members? I see nods, I see heads moving. Member Cohen saying yes.
One follow-up question.
Yes, Ms. Stowers.
Thank you. Who would the letter be addressed to again?
Well, it's my understanding that we would address it to the leadership.
The leadership.
Yes.
I would prefer for the letter to go out from. I would prefer for the letter to go out from Chairman Vasquez, since it would be going to leadership. I just think it should be elected to elected.
Sure, I'm fine with that. Are the members okay? I see heads nodding. I think we have a consensus here.
Yes, and that would be an appropriate approach also.
Thank you. Was there anything else, Ms. Fleming, before we move on from this item?
No, just wanted the opportunity again to thank everyone who has so actively participated in this collaborative effort. Again, acknowledging Assessor Dronenberg and Assessor Prang and their staff, and again to my staff, Richard Moon, David Young, Chief Counsel Nanjo, and all of the managers and staff behind the scene who have worked diligently to prepare for this legislation. It's operative on Tuesday, the 16th, and so we will absolutely perform our duties, but we do need that cleanup legislation. It would be very valuable to us. So members, thank you for this conversation. We appreciate your support, and the next portions of the conversations later on the agenda today will get more into detail of guidance and rulemaking. So we hope that also provides additional and helpful information for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, could you please call the next item?
Certainly. The third sub-item is M1C, update on the forms and processes discussion associated with the implementation of Proposition 19, presented by Ms. Lumsden.
Ms. Lumsden, are you available to present the update on the Prop 19 forms?
Yes, I am. Chair Vasquez and honorable board members, my name is Patty Lumsden, and I'm the chief of the County Assessed Properties Division at the State Board of Equalization. So today I'm here to provide you with an update on the forms portion of the Proposition 19 implementation plan. As discussed in the January 2021 board meeting, BOE staff has created 7 new forms and amended 4 existing forms as part of our Proposition 19 implementation plan. We then submitted those forms for review to the California Assessors Association's Forms Subcommittee and also their Proposition 19 Implementation Ad Hoc Committee to give further review and input on those forms to ensure that the forms were going to meet the needs of the assessors and their staff in trying to implement the provisions of Proposition 19. Both committees finished their review of the forms, and BOE staff was able to incorporate the edits as needed and complete the final versions of the forms. As stated during the January board meeting, in order to expedite the process to issue these 11 forms and meet the first operative date of February 16th, 2021, we distributed the forms through an LTA, which was LTA number 2021-007, and it was issued on February 5th, 2021. The forms were then posted to the BOE's assessor portal for assessors and their staff to access immediately, giving them time to incorporate the new amended forms into their own systems and put in their office logos and tracking information as needed. We also notified the CAA's e-forms liaison, and so they could incorporate the 11 forms into the CAA's e-forms filing system. The next step for the forms is to submit them for the regular annual forms approval process, which will start this month in February. Those 11 forms will go through the CAA's Forms Subcommittee process, where members of the committee can provide any further additional changes or input they deem necessary. Any further changes to these forms will be in agreement with BOE staff and the members of the committee. And then once approved through the Forms Subcommittee process, these 11 forms, along with all other forms that are created and amended during that time, will be approved by the committee for the January 1, 2022 lien date and will be presented to the board members for their final approval and adoption at the board meeting in May 2021. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our BOE staff, specifically Glennis Schultz and Don Barrage, who have been working tirelessly to get these forms completed and always putting out that extra effort to make sure the forms got completed on time. I would also like to thank the CAA's implementation, Prop 19 implementation ad hoc committee. The chair of that committee was Tom Bordenaro, and the committee members were very helpful in assisting us in that process. I would also like to thank the CAA's Forms Subcommittee. Diane Brown is the chair of that committee, and we really appreciate the committee members and both of those committees in assisting us. They had a very short timeline to look at these forms, and they got the forms back to us in plenty of time and with very valuable input on those forms. So we were able to finish the forms on time, and we really appreciate their assistance. And we know as we go forward with Proposition 19, there will be more implementation going on, and whether, you know, the new legislative language could possibly affect the need for needing more additional forms to be created and or amendments to existing forms. And as that process takes place, we will definitely be engaged and committed to working with the CAA and keeping track of whether or not those that process will need to be implemented again for future forms. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have regarding this process.
Thank you, Ms. Lumpson. I have a couple of questions, but let me check with the members first if they have any questions. And I'm not seeing any hands, so I will start with mine. I have just two. The first one, Ms. Lumpson, you and they both have to be with the forms and in the coming future. Question one. The parent-child exclusion claim form, BOE 19-P, has several questions on page 2 where the child transferee must state when they moved into the home and filed for the homeowners or disabled veterans exemption. But the form also says that they have 1 year to file. Is there another form or notice being developed to notify the child before the 1 year is up that they must file for the homeowner exemption?
So this is a good question. So currently there isn't another notice. I mean, this particular form, the claim form for the parent-child exclusion and the grandparent-grandchild exclusions indicate under Proposition 19 that in order to qualify for those exclusions, they must be the principal must be both the transferor and then later the transferee's principal place of residence. And it's a way to do that is through filing for either the homeowner's exemption or the disabled veterans exemption. Those current claim forms are already in existence for the homeowner's exemption and the disabled veterans exemption. And so whether or not there will be anything to notify the child of this deadline, we've notified them on the exclusion claim form, so that's one way that they're being notified. Any other type of notification could possibly come from the assessor's office themselves. I know from my own experience working in the assessor's office as well as being on our BOE survey team auditing assessor's offices, a lot of times, and of course I can't speak for all offices, but a lot of times they issue form letters that go along with claim forms and identify specific filing dates and deadlines or reasons for asking them to, you know, fill out the claim form, that sort of thing. So that may be one way. And a lot of this would be like perhaps a tracking system that may be done internally. And then that being said, of course, we're always open to, if we find that the assessor needs more additional assistance in collecting data from taxpayers, or identifying a need for tracking them, we're always open to assisting any way we can.
Thank you. As I'm looking on the screen, I see we still have our chair, Ernest Dronenberg. How do the assessors, do they go out? Do they give out a notice before the 1 year is up by any chance? I was just curious. I think you're muted. You're muted.
There's a section in the law that requires to be notified if you're no longer a resident of the property. So they have to notify us, otherwise we automatically roll it over under the current system. Now, with the Prop 19 legislation, that's something that we're not sure how the legislature is going to deal with it, but there's a suggestion that if you have the Prop 19 legislation, you take advantage of that you have to notify the office every year that you are a resident of the property. I say that's a suggestion. It hasn't. It's some people are for it and some people are against it. So that's one of the ones the legislature is going to have to be the tiebreaker.
Okay, thank you. My second question, I'm sorry, was there something else?
I was just going to further say, Chair Vasquez, is that I know that at the assessor's offices, when there's been a change in ownership on property, a lot of times they have an automatically generated form that sends out the homeowner's exemption claim form to the taxpayer at that time. And that would be another way that they are notified of the possibility for the homeowner's exemption.
Oh, okay. My second question is, do you know what form or notice will be used to notify the child transferee of the value of the home, the amount that is over that 1 million threshold? Is that something BOE will be generating soon?
So again, there already is in existence, if there is a change to the assessed value on property, that the taxpayer is notified by a notice of supplemental assessment. And those notices of supplemental assessment also give property taxpayers their appeal rights if they disagree with the value. So at that time, if there's anything that they disagree with, they would be able to notify the assessor and or file an assessment appeal with their local clerk of the board.
Thank you. That was my second part of it, and you just answered it. So you also explained, it sounds like you explained to them, or you let them know the process if they choose to appeal or disagree with the value moving forward, right?
Yes, typically the assessor's office would do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and the notice actually has the information on there on what to do and how and who to contact if they wish to file an appeal.
Great. With that, I have no other questions unless any of the other members do. And I see Ernie leaning forward. Does he have a question?
Well, yeah, I took my hand down there. With the new system, if you are let's say you're the son and you get the property, at that time the assessor has an obligation to evaluate the base value of the property, the new base value, what it would be hadn't it transferred. Because if like 2 years later he decides to rent the place, then we'll go back and dig up that original value that it would have occurred, and then we'll increase it by the cost of living for each year and come up with a new value for the person that received the transfer for a prospective basis. So that's just some of the mechanics that are going to be required in this new system.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. And I know last month we approved, this whole to expedite many of the forms and the process and the issuance of new and amended forms. And I understand many of those are already posted on our website. And I believe as we move forward, those are constantly being updated. So for the public, keep checking our website, because as these forms are updated and amended, we'll keep revising the website and posting those. So hopefully you have the latest information before these things are due, or as they come due.
Yeah, Mr. Vasquez, if I
yes.
may, sorry for interrupting you. I just want to make it known to the public. Yeah, I want to make it known to the public too that the forms that are located on our website are typically sample forms, strictly sample forms for them to view and have an idea of what types of forms are out there. But the taxpayer should contact their local county assessor's office where the property is located to actually file and obtain those forms, because they have the assessor's logo and contact information on them. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that they know to go there to get their forms.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I see Member Gaines' hand. Is that an old hand, Member Gaines, or is that a new one?
That's a new one.
Okay, go ahead, Member Gaines.
I'm just wondering about a break. I know that we've got staff that need breaks periodically, and myself included. So I thought I would just throw that out there as to, do we have a plan at some point?
I actually just texted our executive director, and she was checking with staff, and I'm hearing back that they would like to keep going to try to wrap it up sooner. But if the members want to maybe have a quick restroom break, we could do that. How's that? And I'm seeing heads nodding.
That'd be great.
You want to do like is a 10-minute sufficient?
That'd be great.
Is good?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, you know what? Before we do real quick, just so we can wrap up this one item, can we just double check and see if we have any public comment on this issue? And then we'll take a quick 10-minute break. Ms. Taylor, do we have anybody on the line or any written comments on this item?
Yes, we have one brief written comment, and then we can check the line. Our first written comment is from Bonnie Landles-Dowling. Will the BOE direct assessors to accept the notary date as the change in ownership date, or are taxpayers required to record deeds prior to February 16th? AT&T moderator, we will now take public comment on this item. Each caller will have up to 3 minutes to speak. For the record, we request that callers provide their name. Is anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment regarding forms? Thank you.
Thank you. If you wish to make a comment, please press 1 and then 0 at this time. And just one moment. Our first comment is from Alicia. Please go ahead.
Hi, Alicia Gemis again in San Francisco. My question follows on the notary question that just followed, that was just presented. I'm looking at the rules that have been cited, Rule 462.001 and the Rule 462.260. In particular, the Rule 462.260 regarding the change in ownership under Section A references sales and then has a B regarding leases, C regarding inheritance, and D regarding trust, but nothing specifically referencing gifts. There's no E. And so regarding Mr. Moon's prior comments earlier today, that the assessors should be accepting other evidence to rebut the presumption of the recording date versus the document date, I do think the public would very much benefit from some clearer guidance, because it is understood in the legal community that certain assessors have stated that they will be enforcing the recording date and not a signing date or the date placed on a PCOR. And that's causing quite a lot of concern among practitioners who can give our clients no clear guidance. And so just reflecting again on the amount of concern, the very tight timelines, and the pressures that we're dealing with, I would really ask the BOE for prompt clarification upon whether assessors are required to look to the document date and the date presented on the PCOR or a notarization date rather than the recording date. And that's the end of my question.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? And, you know, for those folks that are making questions or comments to us, we will have staff, if they can't answer it on, immediately right now, to at least post something on our website. So please keep checking our website for the latest information. Member Gaines, did you have a question on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because Richard Moon did speak to it on terms of the date. So the date of the change of title, you sign that and there's a date next to it. So that's accepted. Doesn't have to be notarized.
Thank you.
Or recorded. I mean, apparently you can take your case to your assessor, right? In terms of, maybe Ernie could speak to that. Assessor Dronenberg?
Yes, the language of the property statute regulation is permissive. It gives the assessor the ability to use his own discretion to say, yes, that's sufficient to change, to recognize a change in ownership of the property. So any of those dates, the vast majority, I actually haven't heard of any county that is not going to accept it. Now, some counties initially said they were going to require recording, but now have changed after hearing of the property tax law sections. But to my knowledge, there's no county currently that is not going to be accepting a signature on a date or a notarized document.
Okay.
So that
That's great. And we have COVID-19. I mean, this is, everything is moving slowly, more slowly than it typically would in a normal situation. So I'm hoping that there's a lot of grace that's being distributed through the 58 county assessors. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand we still have two more in the queue for public comment. Ms. Taylor?
Our next comment is from Mary Ann. Please go ahead.
Yes, I believe that the legislator really easily, this could be handled by reinstating Proposition 58 to make it simple. When government owns everything, middle class is hurt the most after years of working for family home reforms and basically can lose their home due to excessive taxes. The state wins. People, middle class, lose the most. No time for getting affairs in order or the cost for legal advice. Keep it simple, ABC. Most cannot understand the so-called law that was passed by 1.48% of the total voters of California with its stupid Proposition 19. Basically, to save time, money, put back Proposition 58, period. All with the work that all of you are doing is unnecessary, in my opinion. It is very simple. The legislators have to put back Proposition 58. It is fair, it is just, and it's the right thing to do. We need more Jiminy Crickets in the legislature, not Pinocchios. We need Jiminy Crickets in the legislators. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next comment's from Yelena. Please go ahead.
Hi, I notarized the paper, and I noticed that this notary has his commission expire before he notarized, and he gave me the paper which says that Governor Newsom has issued Executive Order N-7120, which extends notary commission that expires in certain days. And that paper says, in addition, when you perform notarization, your original expiration date is when expire. You must include the following statement. The notary commission extends pursuant of executive order, different order for whatever reason, N-6320. And he did. He notarized. I noticed that his commission date is expired, and he put on different ink that notary commission extended pursuant to executive order N-6320. Will I have any problem with this notarization?
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, was that the last one?
Yes, I believe that's the last caller.
I'm looking at the time now. It's 12, almost 12:50. So if we do a 10-minute break, why don't we reconvene at 1 o'clock, if that works? I see a hand by Member Gaines. We're good. At 1 o'clock, we'll reconvene. 10-minute break. Thank you. See you in a bit.
The second item is M2, Proposition 19, Implementation. Board member discussion and possible actions on the implementation of Proposition 19, the Home Protection for Seniors, Severely Disabled, Families, and Victims of Wildfire or Natural Disasters Act of 2020.
Thank you. Members, before us now is an update and discussion on the plan for two sub-items. Sub-item M2A, an update on proposed guidance and emergency rulemaking. And sub-item M2B, an update on Prop 19 Education and Outreach Plan. Ms. Taylor, would you please call the first sub-item under M2?
The first sub-item is M2A, Guidance and Rulemaking, presented by Mr. Young and Mr. Moon.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Vasquez and honorable members of the board. This is David Young, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Property Tax Department. So I think we're going to split up our work a little bit here, and I'll address the guidance, and if Mr. Moon will be so kind as to address the rulemaking, I will proceed. So today I'm going to give you an update as to our efforts so far in the guidance that the board, the Property Tax Department, has produced for Prop 19. So to date, this is what a little bit of history, this is what we've done so far. The board has developed and placed guidance on our website to include the comparison charts for the parent-child and the grandparent-grandchild exclusions, guidance under LTA 2020/061. That is the initial LTA that we put out last year at the end of the year that basically announced and gave some information on the passage of Prop 19. We also, Ms. Lumsden has already presented her LTA under which the Property Tax Department basically created 7 forms and revised or amended 4 more. She's already reported out on that. Also on our website is information related to Prop 19. We have on there the Chief Counsel memo. It's posted on our website. That's the Chief Counsel memo from January 8th of this year, giving the interpretation of Prop 19 in a Q&A format. We've also developed, also on our website is some FAQs that have been placed on there. And we've also made other information available on our website, additional resources. I believe our original matrix of concerns and issues, a combined matrix of the boards and the assessors is posted on there also. So that's what we've done so far in guidance and information for assessors and stakeholders and taxpayers. So what are we doing right now? Right now, while we're waiting to see the official language of any proposed legislation, we've also drafted an LTA on specifically on the parent-child and the grandparent-grandchild exclusions. It is in a Q&A format, and right now it actually has over 40 questions and answers in it. It is quite a robust document, in my opinion. A lot of time and effort has gone into drafting that document. Some of the areas that are covered in that LTA has to do with questions on the effective date and timing of transactions for that exclusion, what qualifies as a family home and as a family farm. There's filing requirements that are we have developed Q&As for. There's a section that addresses properties held in trust, properties that have gone only a partial transfer, and we also have quite a few examples of the valuation calculations, how they're done, with actually examples of it. So right now, that document is going through internal review. Our goal is to get it out there and publish it as soon as possible. If we can, we would like to do it by the 16th of this month. That is it will be an undertaking, but it is something that we have, that the property tax department with legal, with all the other departments have worked on. So it does represent some, I believe, to be some very valuable guidance for the assessors and stakeholders and taxpayers. Let me, if I can, let me just put a placeholder there, and I'll circle back on that one. What we are continuing to do, what we will continue to do is we'll continue to review and amend and develop new forms as they are, as their need arises and folks and assessors ask and find a need for it. We will continue to do that. We will continue to update board website with Prop 19 information. This will be our second basic guidance on Prop 19, but we will continue to develop and put out guidance on Prop 19. There's a whole other section with the base year transfers that will need to be addressed. We will continue to review and update assessor's handbook sections, annotations, and other guidance that we may have. I know we will be very, very busy with promulgating rules after, which Mr. Moon will expound on. We will continue to track legislation as it moves through. And internally, what we will start on doing also is updating and revising our clearinghouse function. We do track transfers for the disabled and for base year transfers. Now we currently track them, but there's only a one-time limit there. But now they'll be able to do it 3 times for the 55 and disabled base year transfers. So we will be working on that also. So we have quite a full agenda of things that we are working on in order to implement Prop 19 in a timely manner. I know the part of that will be this LTA that we have developed and are planning on releasing as soon as possible. So I know it will go through I believe it will go through our regular channels. But what I am going to ask for is your assistance in getting it out in a timely manner. It may, when we do have that LTA ready, it will go through our regular preview process, and it will go into your offices, and we will probably need to turn that around quickly. So I'm just, hopefully I can count on your assistance on that part. This basically concludes my presentation. Of course, I am available for any questions you may have on this part, or we can take it at the end of Mr. Moon's presentation at your pleasure.
I'm not seeing any hands up right now, so why don't we go on with Mr. Moon?
Good afternoon, Chairman Vasquez. I'm going to provide a brief update on the regulations. So we have been working on drafting regulations that govern Prop 19 that will fill in some of the gaps that are in the constitutional amendment and that are also likely to be in any forthcoming legislation. And this may also be a good time to describe the legislation as Ms. Cohen had requested. And so with your permission, I'll do that as well. So the legislation that was posted to the PAN last month, it includes specifics that are not in the amendment, the constitutional amendment itself, around largely filing requirements. There are some substantive type things in there, and then around valuation as well. So on filing, the draft legislation largely mirrors existing requirements for both intergenerational and base year value transfers. Some of the substance in the legislation is discussed in the legal memo. For example, for base year transfers, either the sale or the purchase can be after April 1. And then the way that the property is valued is also discussed in the legislation. We've asked that the legislature authorize emergency regulations so that we can promulgate them quickly. And with that authorization, we would have more certainty. And this has been done in the most recent past with a bill called SB 791, which you may recall had to do with aircraft, and through which we were able to do Emergency Rule 202. With any legislation, however, just because of the very nature of legislation, there are still going to be gaps, and our regulations will attempt to fill some of these. For example, the rules will not just explain how and when a claim must be filed, but it would also give some concrete examples so that it would be more clear. Although the forms have been already completed, the rules will provide an underpinning for some of the information that's required by the forms. And then finally, although Prop 19 explains, for example, how to calculate the amount of a family home that can be excluded from reassessment, it does not explain how to calculate taxable value in various situations, such as partial interest transfers or when the family home is no longer the child's family home. And so the rules will attempt to explain some of these calculations and, again, give concrete examples so that it becomes more clear. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. Let me first start off by just thanking both Mr. Young and Mr. Moon. Again, I want to express my thanks for your very hard work. I know these last couple months have been difficult, and both of you have gone out of your way and above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that we have the latest updates on, especially as we move forward with this Prop 19 rules and amendments that we're looking to work with, and guidance specifically here. But I have a question that I want to ask Mr. Young. I have and it's pertaining to, it's a similar question that I asked last month at our last meeting, and it's, do you have an update on on your review of the LTA number 2008/18 on the parent-child exclusion that includes information on the aspects of the exclusion that are not changing under Prop 19? It's a very helpful 23-page question and answer LTA that many practitioners and the public refer to. I would really like to have an update by the February 23rd meeting, if at all possible, so that the public can understand what parts of it are still reliable. For example, are the question and answers on transfers through trust on page 9 through 11 the same? Or can you have that information available for the 23rd based on your schedule? Is that a possibility?
Yes, this is David Young again. Thank you for that question. I have taken a very preliminary look at that LTA. You are correct. There are some very, very good questions in there and some very good answers. In specific, the part about the trust, as Mr. Moon has mentioned earlier today, the vehicle of a trust and its function basically stays the same. What changes is a little bit of, well, not a little bit. What changes is the property that's eligible for this type of transfer under Prop 19. So the parts that are not applicable deal specifically with the other types of property. There are whole sections in that LTA that deals with property other than a primary residence. Of course, that will not be applicable anymore under the current scheme of Prop 19. It is only for that, a primary residence or a family farm as defined. So there are some that will be applicable and some that will not. What I will do is I will actually bring a more detailed report to you on the 23rd, but there are some parts of that LTA that is still, like I said, very applicable. What I am contemplating in doing is, even though parts of that LTA will not be applicable under Prop 19, there will still be some transfers of property that are not discovered by the assessor or not recorded or somehow not handled until after February 16th that fall under the old rules of Prop 58 and Prop 193. So I'm a little hesitant in going through and annotating an LTA that says this is Apple and this is not, because there may be some transfers that have happened prior to February 16, 2021 that will still follow those rules. Perhaps I thought maybe a better approach to it would be to say this is Apple for all transfers that happened prior to the 16th and leave it there, because some of those transfers may take several years to make its way all the way through, especially stuff that are held in trust and not distributed later, or they don't file until much later. So I will bring a more complete report to you on the 23rd, but I am starting to see the need at least to keep that type of guidance out there, at least for the short or even the medium term, to address that type of situation where transactions have happened that just have not been processed just yet.
Thank you. It's my understanding that under both current law and Prop 19, it's really important for the child to file the change of ownership statement due to death of the property owner form BOE 502-D, because if they miss this deadline, they can get hit with a big penalty. On top of losing a parent and dealing with the new law under Prop 19, as you continue updating the LTAs, would you please include information explaining why it's important for the children to file this form timely, 150, I believe it's 150 days after death of the property owner?
Yes, Chairman Vasquez, I will keep that in mind. You are absolutely correct. Under Revenue Taxation Code 480, there is a provision that this type of transfer upon death needs to be filed within 150 days. And you are correct. Once again, there are some fines attached to that if they don't meet that, and it can be a significant number. I believe the highest it can be for primary residence is $5,000. So it can be significant. We will find venues in which to put that information out there.
Thank you. Oh, I see a hand here from Ms. Stowers. Go ahead, Ms. Stowers. You're muted, though.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Moon, if he's still available.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. So I really appreciate that you guys are starting to draft property tax rules / regulations. A couple of things for the general public who most likely are listening but do not understand the rulemaking process. Will you please walk through that process, the regular rulemaking process and the emergency rulemaking process? And in addition, can you speak to whether the rules that you're drafting would be interpretive or quasi-legislation? And what's the difference between the two? And with that question, I'm thinking about Yamaha versus the State Board of Equalization.
Yes. So, well, let me take, I guess, your most technical question first, the difference between quasi-legislative and interpretive. Essentially, the difference is quasi-legislative regulations are regulations that the legislature has specifically authorized us to do. And so I would say, well, I guess I would take the position, and perhaps people would argue, have an argument about this, but the vast majority of regulations that we do as the board for property tax are quasi-legislative, because we have direct authority to do all kinds of property tax regulations through the government code. In terms of how the emergency rules work and the regular rulemaking, works. For emergency rules, they're designed to be able to get through the OAL approval process more quickly. And so what that requires is a publication of a notice that an agency is going to do emergency rules. And then from that point, it would take probably roughly about a month or so in order for OAL to look at those, and perhaps less, to look at those and then to approve it. And I should say for an agency to get the rules to OAL, for OAL to look at it and approve it, and then have them become effective. So the timeline is fairly quick. For the regular rulemaking process, there are a host of other requirements, one of which is to have a public hearing on the rules. And partially because of that, it's been the board's practice in the past before the board officially approves the publication of the rule, that there are interested parties meetings that go on between staff, assessors, and other interested parties to try and get rules that I would say, there's not always a consensus, but rules that that perhaps most are comfortable with. That typically goes to the board, and the board will approve and make decisions that need to be made. And then we would have to wait 45 days, and then there would be a public hearing. And at that public hearing, assuming that there's no changes that the board desires, the board would approve those rules, and then we would send it to OAL. And then that starts a whole sort of another process where OAL goes through their requirements to review the rules, and at the same time, it would need to go to the Department of Finance, and they would have to sign off on those rules as well. So that whole entire regular rulemaking process could take a year or more, and that's been our experience in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure that everyone listening had a good understanding of the process that we're looking at.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I have a couple for Mr. Moon, but I was just checking to see if there's any hands. Seeing none. Mr. Moon, on the homeowners in particular in my district are asking many detailed questions about how Prop 19 legislation will be implemented. I have two questions that have been raised that I was just wanting to get your take in terms of the rulemaking process. The first one is a provision allowing for one transferee child who made the parent's home their principal residence wants to move out and have their sibling make it their principal resident instead. Can a rule ensure that this is possible without a change in ownership?
So I guess it depends, and it relates back to the question you had asked in my answer to one of your first questions in a different part of this report. But it depends if both siblings were transferred a part of the principal residence by the parent. That can certainly be put in a rule, and it is part of the LTA guidance that's being ready to be published that Mr. Young had alluded to. However, if only one of the siblings was the recipient of the family home, and they wanted to give that home to the other sibling, even if the other sibling was going to move in and make that their principal residence, we could not do that by rule. And that's because the current law does not exclude transfers from one sibling to another. And so that would require a law change before we were able to put that in a rule.
Oh, so it literally has to be specified that it was handed down to the two siblings, because it sounds like if you said it was just handed down to one, the one sibling doesn't have that power to transfer it to their sibling without a transfer of ownership, basically, right?
That's correct, and that's not a function of Prop 19. That's the current state of the law under Prop 58 and 193 as well.
Oh, so that didn't change in Prop 19 then?
That did not change.
Okay. And then my second question is, we also have a statement under current law that I'd like to put into the Prop 19 rule that some have asked about, saying that there's no limit to the number of principal residents a person can have. The example in our LTA says a parent can transfer a large family home to one child, move into their second home using it as their principal residence, and then transfer that home to another child, and so on. I would like to include this rule for Prop 19. Is that doable?
Yes, and actually this is another example of an issue that is in the LTA guidance, and we can certainly consider that for inclusion in the rule as well.
Thank you. With that, unless I'm not seeing any other questions. I wanted to just kind of check with the members here. Is there a consensus on both the plan we're hearing from Mr. Moon and Mr. Young moving forward, especially as we're talking about rulemaking for moving forward on this point? I'm seeing some heads nodding. Okay. So I believe there is a consensus unless I get a hand or an objection here. All right, thank you. Thank you for that. So we have a consensus both for Mr. Young and Mr. Moon. With that, oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Stowers, go ahead.
I'm in agreement with it, but I kind of would like to be consistent with what I said last month and have a motion so that it's really clear that the staff has our blessing. And now my dog is barking. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to,
sure, go ahead.
To authorize Mr. Moon and Mr. Young to move forward with the guidance that Mr. Young outlined in his presentation, and for Mr. Moon to continue to draft rulemaking as he addressed in his presentation.
All right, so it's been formally moved by Ms. Stowers. If there's no second, I will second that. Any discussion? Hands, no comments? Ms. Taylor, if you could please call the roll on that.
Chairman Vasquez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Aye.
Member Gaines.
Aye.
Member Cohen.
Aye. Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers.
Aye.
So that's unanimous. Thank you for that. With that, Ms. Taylor, if you would please call the second sub-item under M2.
Chair Vasquez, we do have one written comment on this item.
Right, on M1?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Or M2, yeah, M2A. Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And our written comment is from Michael Kazantsev. For Prop 19 property transfers, what happens if we submit our transfer documents to the assessor's office on February 12th? February 15th is a holiday, but it is not processed until February 16th or 17th or even later due to a backlog of too many forms in the assessor's office that they can't get through in time through no fault of their own. Is it still considered a transfer in time?
I believe we addressed that, but we could put it out there again on our website. Was there any other written comments, Ms. Taylor, or was that it?
That completes the written comments.
I guess can we check with AT&T if there's anybody on the line on this particular item?
Yes. AT&T moderator, we will now take public. You do?
Yep,
okay.
We do have somebody in queue here, so it'll be just one moment. And once again, that's 1 then 0.
It's Mary.
And we have a comment coming from Mary Ann Welch. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just want to make it very clear to the board here that this legislation, Proposition 19, number one, was a twisted motivation by the governor to basically put in his own idea and change the legislation and change the Constitution without really any real due process and put it on the ballot quickly. That's one thing. The other thing I want to say to the board, as you know, Newsom apparently is going to be recalled. They do have the number of votes now to recall Governor Newsom. And I would just like to...
Chair Vasquez, point of order, Vice Chair Schaefer. We don't need to talk about the governor and his politics. Would you please strike that?
Okay, fine. But the point that I'm making is that this Proposition 19 never would have been on the ballot had it not been for the interference of the governor. That's my point. And the other point that I'm trying to make here, if I can please, is that this is causing so much grief to so many people. I'm sure that everyone that is on the board listening to this knows this. It goes on and on. None of you would be doing any of this work had the legislation done their duty and their job. They didn't do it. They passed it over to you. They passed it over to the assessor's office. They passed it over to tax attorneys. They passed it over to the legal department. And now we have what you call a total mess. I really believe that this Proposition 19 needs to be amended and Proposition 58 put back, and I think that should be one of the items that the Board of Equalization would give to the legislators to reconsider putting back Proposition 58 for the good of everybody. And I mean everybody in the state of California. I mean everybody, the middle class, the people that have worked so hard to keep their property. And now with this outrageous taxes, outrageous rules and regulations and paperwork and all the work that you people have done, I feel for you because that is not really what you're supposed to be doing. The legislators should have done it, and it was never done. They had plenty of time to do it, and they passed it over to you because they didn't do their job. They didn't have a review. They didn't have public hearing. They didn't. In fact, I, as a voter, didn't even know this junk was going to be on the ballot. On top of that, when you read it, it was underhanded, prejudiced, and unconstitutional, in my humble opinion. Pass.
Thank you.
And we have another comment coming from Alicia. Please go ahead.
Hello there. This is Alicia Gomez again in San Francisco. The thing that I know that you feel that you have, or it has been stated that it's felt that the question regarding recording date versus transfer date has been addressed. The problem that we, I think, as practitioners have is that what I've understood you to it be said today is that that's a discretionary call by the assessor. And when you're leaving something to an assessor who has to an assessor's discretion, we can't proceed with confidence. And so it's, if there is clear guidance that the BOE can provide, or clear guidance, and it would have to be provided quite promptly, obviously, because people are dealing with this immediately, that would be very, very helpful. And I'm very puzzled by the prior caller's comments about Governor Newsom, and I will leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else on the line?
One more.
Oh, go ahead.
Yep, there's one more. We have one more comment in the queue here with Yulisa. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Yulisa Zuleika, San Francisco attorney as well. I was actually, Alicia Gomez just asked my question, and that is a still pending question, I think, that hasn't been directly answered. And the question that I wanted to piggyback on was the one before that, specifically about submitting documents that aren't recorded until a later date. And I didn't hear that addressed, and if you wouldn't mind repeating it, I may have missed it, and if I did, I'm sorry, but how are those being treated if it's submitted timely, but it's not being recorded until a later date post February 16th?
Tony?
Yes, I see. Mr. Dronenberg, go ahead, Ernie.
Yeah, well, as she said, and I am also the recorder for San Diego County, and we do have a substantial backlog, but it's not that great. But what I tried to allude to earlier is that the language gives the assessor the ability to accept something other than a recorded deed. You can accept a signature on, as Mr. Gaines said, on a grant deed, or you can take a signature in a notary's book. That it just allows the taxpayer to get something faster than the recorded actual deed in the recorder's books of the county. So, and as I said earlier too, I haven't heard of any assessor in the state so far. There were some earlier ones that have changed their mind, that is not accepting anything that would show that there is a change.
Thank you. I see a hand from Member Gaines. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
The same issue?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Chair Vasquez. And I am wondering if I could speak to Richard Moon. Is he on?
Yes, I'm on.
And I guess it would be to you and also to Brenda Fleming, our Executive Director, but could we respond with an LTA to provide clarity on this issue? So there was some certainty for people who are going through this process.
So what I can tell you is that the letter to assessors that Mr. Young had mentioned is in the works, and we are hoping to have out by Tuesday. We'll have guidance on this. But as also both Mr. Young and I had said previously, there is an existing property tax rule. And of course, the rule cannot cover every single situation that might exist out there. But I believe that rule is clear that an assessor need not go by the date of recording. And so that authority is there for the assessor to look at other documents and other dates. What I can also say is that because that rule is there, or partially because that rule is there, it would be inappropriate for us to say that an assessor must use a particular date. I think this is a situation where an assessor needs the flexibility to be able to look at whatever documents may or may not be provided and make a determination on his or her own. And I believe Mr. Dronenberg had said that he's not aware of any assessor that's taking the position anymore that the recordation date will be the date of transfer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moon. So it sounds like the BOE doesn't have the authority to provide clarity because the authority is granted to the county assessor.
Well, I think the way that I would say it is that we have the authority to provide rules by which the assessor will make a determination. And we have done that in the rule. And so now the assessor can take those rules and apply them as he or she sees fit based on the information that they're getting.
Okay, but we can't it sounds like we can't give absolute clarity on this issue.
If by absolute clarity you mean that for us to say something to the effect of an assessor must accept some date other than the recordation date, that would go against our regulation.
Okay. I just want to get to the bottom of it because I think the attorneys are looking for that clarity, but it sounds like you're just going to have to work with your county assessor, and based on what Assessor Dronenberg is sharing with us, that apparently they've all been cooperative in all 58 counties to the best of, I think, Ernie's knowledge. So I think that's what we've got to rely on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, was that it, or did we have somebody else? Oh, I see Ms. Stowers, a hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, just a real quick question. Mr. Moon, what was that property tax rule again, please?
It's 462.260.
260. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor.
Yes, there is no one else on the public comment line.
Thank you. With that, can we move on to the next sub-item under M2, please?
Certainly. The second sub-item is M2B, Education and Outreach, update on the communications plan on education and outreach for Proposition 19, presented by Mr. Kim and Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. First of all, let me just start off with kudos to both Ms. Kim and Ms. Thompson for putting up the Prop 19 webpage. I've shared this with my constituents and many of the legislators who find it very helpful. At the last meeting, the board approved the staff recommendations for communications plan on education and outreach. The plan would include materials on Prop 19 generated by the BOE and the Taxpayers' Rights Advocate's Office, utilization of all electronic and traditional means of communications, and an accompanying PowerPoint presentation on Prop 19 for our website and for educational venues. Ms. Kim and Ms. Thompson, are you available for any updates?
Yes, we are. Thank you. Chairman Vasquez and honorable members, this is Peter Kim, Chief Communications Officer. At last month's meeting, the board approved the communications plan on education and outreach on Proposition 19. Since then, I have worked closely in collaboration with the Taxpayers' Rights Advocate, Ms. Lisa Thompson, and we wanted to provide an update of what we have done in the past few weeks. The Proposition 19 webpage has been enhanced and updated since the January board meeting. Specifically, we have added frequently asked questions with the assistance from our property tax and legal departments. In addition, as we continue to serve as a repository of information, we have added an additional resources tab that includes a link of the listing of all 58 county assessors, auditors, and auditor controllers, clerks of the board, and tax collectors. We also included the link to the Proposition 19 analysis and implementation planning matrix for those who want more information. Also, on February 1st, 2021, the BOE issued a news release entitled Significant Property Tax Law Change to Come Later This Month to alert the media and their subscribers of the quickly approaching change to the intergenerational transfers. Finally, we have utilized our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, to broaden our reach and share the information that has been added to our website. I will now turn it over to Lisa Thompson, the Taxpayer Rights Advocate, for an update on the Proposition 19 fact sheet and the accompanying PowerPoint presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman and honorable board members. This is Lisa Thompson, the agency's Taxpayer Rights Advocate, and I'm pleased to be here with Peter Kim, the agency's Chief Communication Officer, to update you on the progress of our work on taxpayer education efforts concerning Proposition 19 that we shared with you at last month's board meeting. At the January 15th, 2021 board meeting, we shared with you our plan to develop a fact sheet to identify the main components of Proposition 19 and direct taxpayers to resources where they can find additional information. We are pleased to inform you that a fact sheet was created as of the February 1st, 2021 date, and that was posted to our website under the Additional Resources tab of our Proposition 19 page. That fact sheet is entitled Proposition 19 Fact Sheet, and it presents information on the base year value taxable value transfer provisions for seniors and disabled persons that become effective April 1st, 2021, and presents information on the parent-child and grandparent-grandchild exclusion that become effective February 16th, 2021. The fact sheet identifies what the provisions of Proposition 19 allows, what property it applies to, and what must be done to qualify. the benefit of the base year value transfer exclusion, and examples to illustrate the calculations for value tests under the new law. The fact sheet is written in simple, non-technical terms, so it is easy to understand. The publication of this fact sheet will help educate taxpayers, increase taxpayer awareness to ensure people are informed about the provisions of the new law, and to understand the potential for property tax savings and how to apply for them. Additionally, at last month's meeting, I indicated that we could prepare a PowerPoint presentation based on that Proposition 19 fact sheet that could be used by a board member's office for speaking engagements throughout the state to increase awareness. I am also pleased to inform you that the PowerPoint presentation, as well as talking points for that PowerPoint presentation, have been completed. I, as the agency's taxpayer rights advocate, worked closely with Peter Kim, our agency's communications officer, to prepare the fact sheet, PowerPoint presentation, and accompanying talking points. The PowerPoint presentation slides have been posted on the Proposition 19 page under the Additional Resources tab. The PowerPoint presentation document is identified on our website as Introduction to Proposition 19 Presentation as of February 1st, 2021. As implementing legislation for Proposition 19 is adopted by the legislature, the Taxpayer Rights Advocate Office and the Communications Officer will work together to update the material as necessary. Now I will turn it back over to our Chief Communications Officer, Peter Kim, to conclude his remarks, and then we can address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. As the Taxpayers' Rights Advocate Lisa Thompson has mentioned, both the Proposition 19 fact sheet and the accompanying PowerPoint presentation were created with the taxpayer in mind. They were developed in plain English and with examples so that all taxpayers can easily understand the new law. As noted, both the fact sheet and PowerPoint presentation are available on our website and also have been featured on our social media channels. I have also reached out to various organizations such as the California Taxpayers Association, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the California Association of Realtors, the California Farm Bureau Federation, AARP California, the California Lawyers Association's Taxation, Real Property Law, and Trust and Estate section, and the California Society of CPAs to inform them of the available resources we have on our website. I have also encouraged them to share these resources with their members. Finally, I know that in each of your equalization districts, you have either hosted or co-hosted an informational town hall or media availability, and your efforts and leadership on this issue have greatly assisted in getting the word out as the operative dates get near. This concludes our update, and Ms. Thompson and I are available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Peter Kim and Ms. Lisa Thompson. I see one hand up right now from Member Gaines. Let's start with that one first.
Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to thank both Peter and Lisa, because I think we're more engaged. I think you know, as we progress as a new board, you know, roughly 2 years for all of us serving, it's nice to see that, particularly in this case of Prop 19, that we're able to respond in a fairly efficient manner and get the information out that we need to get out to our constituents. And so the upgrade to the website itself is great, and then to see how we can use that as a kind of in a real-time communication method for our constituents. In this instance, in Prop 19 is really helpful, and I appreciate your comments, Chair Vasquez, about daily updates. As we're learning more information about Prop 19 or other matters that relate to BOE, that is a nice nice complementary aspect of an updated website that we can be communicating on a regular basis, so that if people have questions, and they've got a lot on Prop 19, but they will in other areas in the future too, that we can provide that information resource. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mr. Peter Kim, just my apologies. I think I said Miss Kim at the outset, and I meant to say Mr. Kim. But moving forward, though, is there, as we're looking at the webpage, and I know you're updating this regularly, is it possible to add, I'm thinking, it'd probably be helpful is to add somewhere in our website there, like a taxpayer's to-do list, something on Prop 19 within our webpage that would kind of explain the when and why to many of these folks that are looking at it now, especially, with all these changes happening as we speak, and hopefully more to come as we begin to move some possible cleanup language here in the near future. And I was wondering if that's something you've already been thinking about, and if you haven't, if you could include something like that, I think that would be really helpful to the taxpayers and to many of us that are constantly checking in on our website.
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that question. This is Peter Kim again, Chief Communications Officer. Thank you for that great suggestion, and we'll definitely look into adding additional tabs, such as taxpayer to-do list that you mentioned that can be helpful to taxpayers. Just like I noted before, we are committed to serving as a repository of information. And as you alluded to, once more clarification is given on the gaps and ambiguities, we will definitely refine and add more resources to our website. So we will definitely be looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then if I'm not seeing any other hands, one other suggestion I wanted to add, and it's really, it's one of the issues I'd also was considering and preparing on the posting of some of the information for taxpayers on how to apply for homeowners exemption. Since almost all the provisions in Prop 19 will require the person to apply for and receive the homeowners or disability veterans exemption. We have many old LTAs on this, but it would be helpful for people to understand what makes them eligible for homeowners exemptions and any annual renewal they must submit and how long they can be absent from the home before they become ineligible, I think might be helpful as well.
Hi, this is Lisa Thompson. I'll go ahead and address that question or comment. Thank you for that suggestion on posting the information as to how to apply for the homeowners or disabled veterans exemption, since many of the Proposition 19 provisions require people to apply for such exemption in order to qualify. Currently, our website has comprehensive information about both of these types of exemptions. They have a specific or separate pages for each of them, but we can develop some language that could be added to the Proposition 19 page to simply advise taxpayers what form is used to apply for each of these exemptions, how they can apply for the exemptions, and that the form to apply can be obtained from the county assessor's office where the property is located. And we can also go ahead and add a link to some of the existing homeowners exemption page on the website, as well as the disabled veterans, where they can find more resources and read more about those exemptions. So I think that's a great idea. I'll work with Peter Kim to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand for Member Gaines.
Oh, just a follow-up question, if I could, for Peter Kim and our website. Are we monitoring how many hits that we're getting on the website, and can that be? Can we isolate? If people are on our website and they're going to Prop 19, can we isolate how many people are clicking on the Prop 19 button versus other areas on the website? If you could just provide
Yes,
that.
thank you for that question, Board Member Gaines. Yes, we are able to get analytics on our website and differentiate between the clicks that we get from internal users, from external users. We could also get geographical data in terms of where folks, where they're located, and can get that. I don't have the specific current analytics with me now, but if you're interested, I could definitely look into that and just circle back with your office.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think it'd be helpful for all of us if we could get breakdowns of what people are inquiring about on the website from our districts. That would be helpful for us to know that, so that we're making sure that we are responding as electeds.
Yes, sir. I don't know if they could provide it by equalization districts. I think it's based on metropolitan areas, but of course we could break down the data as much as we can and just let the members know what folks are interested in. And I'm pretty sure I could anticipate that we've probably got a lot of hits on our Prop 19 webpage. I know that there's been a lot of traffic just based on anecdotal evidence. So we'll definitely get that to all the members.
That's great. Are we also getting suggestions coming from constituents on the website? So if they have an idea or they're having trouble finding information, are we getting that input and addressing it?
Yeah, actually, we've received some feedback from constituents and taxpayers on certain items that they wanted to see but were unable to locate. I think that's why we have the different tabs we have on our Prop 19 webpage, because we wanted to make it, again, as a repository of information for taxpayers. And so normally folks had to go to the public agenda notice to get the materials on certain items, such as like the Chief Counsel memo and the implementation matrix, but we wanted to make it easier and more centralized. And so that's why we have those on there. And so we received some feedback from different taxpayers, and that's how we're able to develop the webpage as well.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Along those lines, Mr. Peter Kim, since we've been getting so many questions about, especially the transfer and the recorded date today, is it possible to update our web site like today to make sure that's on there, since this is right around the corner for many people?
Yes, sir. I know that the recording date is a priority of the board, and I have been alerted to make sure that it's incorporated. I can't make a commitment that it will be up by today, but we are definitely working hard to ensure that it's up as soon as possible. I know that a lot of folks have that question, and so I'm working with my team here to make sure we could include it in a timely manner.
I appreciate that. Members, is there any other questions or comments of either Mr. Peter Kim or Miss Lisa Thompson? Seeing no hand. Oh, I see one. I see Ms. Towers. Go ahead, Ms. Towers.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Thompson, Mr. Kim, for all their hard work and dedication with respect to the web page and the taxpayer education and outreach, and also fielding some of the calls that I've received regarding Prop 19. You guys have done an excellent job. I appreciate the fact sheet's easy to follow. Although I couldn't get the PowerPoint, I do appreciate that as well. And since I'm talking, I want to go ahead and thank everyone, staff, Mr. Moon, Mr. Young, Ms. Lumsden, Ms. Fleming, the whole BOE team. You guys have really done an excellent job in handling this very difficult proposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know, Mrs. Stowers, you mentioned we shouldn't just do a consensus, we should have a vote. So would you like to move that we're at least the board is on board with both Ms. Lisa Thompson and Mr. Peter Kim's work plan as they move forward with the this whole rulemaking plan.
So move.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, seconded.
It's chaired and it's seconded by our Vice Chair. And with that, Mrs. Taylor, if you'd take a roll call, please.
Chair, would you first like to take public comment before the vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot. Do we have any written comments first?
We do have a written comment, and Ms. Renati will read that comment. The first comment is from Derek Foes. Dear board members, I am a CPA in Santa Cruz County, frantically trying to educate and evaluate Prop 19 issues with my clients. While I feel the voters were misled by massive marketing campaign led by realtor associations and that the propositions should be challenged, I am only seeking a motion to extend the February 15 deadline to file paperwork needed to transfer properties from parents to children. Due to the pandemic, many county offices are limited or closed, and meeting the February 15 deadline is challenging, especially since it falls on a holiday weekend. Furthermore, the BOE still hasn't released enough guidance on the issue, and advisors are left guessing on strategies to mitigate the effects. Some advice may prove to be more detrimental and lead to malpractice. Many voters were misled by the marketing of the proposition claiming to help the disabled, elderly, and fire victims, and are unaware of what they truly voted for. It's very common for children and grandchildren to move in with mom and dad in order to afford to live in the area where they grew up. Mom and dad may have moved into another residence or care facility, and the $1 million exemption won't apply. The next generation will be uprooted or blindsided by a higher cost of living. Those who are willing to pay the new assessments will need to raise rents on rental properties, making rents even less affordable. Multi-generation business owners who own their buildings may need to sell. Wealthy retirees, not necessarily seniors, will be allowed to move to other counties and carry their low tax basis and have the advantage to outbid other would-be home buyers. Fire victims will now have less time to rebuild with no relief for their business property. These are just some of the issues that taxpayers need to be educated on. I hope that the BOE will consider these issues and offer an extension of several months so that the public can be educated and avoid being blindsided by a proposition that by its title alone is misleading. Sincerely, Derek Foes, CPA. Thank you. AT&T moderator, we will now take public comment. Each caller will have up to 3 minutes to speak.
I apologize for the interruption.
Do we have anyone on the line for public comment?
We do have somebody on the line for public comment. Mary Ann Welch, please go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of comments. One is I think the taxes should be on the assessed value, not the market value. And my idea was to tax anywhere from 2 to 5% of any property that it's transferred each time it's transferred. Thereby, they would be getting some taxes, not 700% taxes on the market value. That's my idea. Anywhere from 2 to 5% transfer tax fee every time a property is transferred. That way, it's a continual tax, but it doesn't have to be the market value at 700% that no one could afford. And also, my next comment will be, we are killing California citizens with taxes. Something really needs to be done, folks. And I know that the BOE is trying to do their best, and I have a lot of respect for you people. And I'm really sad that you have to even go through all this, because if the legislators would have done their job properly, you wouldn't be doing this, number one. Number two, I really believe that this Proposition 19 is basically underhanded, it's prejudice, and it is unconstitutional in my opinion, and it wasn't completely stated in the voter's handbook. Pass.
Was that it?
I believe that completes. Yep.
Thank you. Now we'll go back to our motion. Ms. Taylor, if you can please call the roll on that motion.
Yes. Chair Vasquez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Aye.
Member Gaines.
Aye.
Member Cohen.
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stour.
Aye.
So that's unanimous of all those present with us today. With that, Ms. Taylor, if you would please call our next item.
Our next item is N, public comment on matters not on the agenda. Persons who wish to address the Board of Equalization regarding items not on the agenda have an opportunity to speak now.
And once again, that is 1, then 0 for a public comment. And we have Mary Ann Welch in the, hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Your line is open.
Okay. I'd like to thank the Board of Equalization for all the work they've tried to do. And I still say it's really unfortunate that they have to go through all this because the legislators did not do their job and they passed it over to the Board of Equalization. But I'd like to make one other comment. I did contact one lawyer for at least their opinion. And here's what he wrote back to me. I want the board to really hear this. He said to me, I appreciate your legitimate concerns and the threat to everyone's liberty and property that's going on here. That's what the lawyer told me. So my concerns are legitimate and it's a threat to our liberty as people that own property here in California. This Proposition 19 is absolutely needs to be amended and absolutely needs to be re-looked at carefully. And I hope that the Board of Equalization can find someone in the legislature to put it back on the ballot and reinstall Proposition 58 in its entirety. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a public comment from Kathleen. Your line is now open.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to read this little letter that I wrote, okay? Dear ladies and sirs of the California Board of Equalization, last week I was taking a walk with a former neighbor friend of mine, and she gave me some papers regarding Proposition 19. When I read the paper, I was deeply concerned. I'd have to say my stress level went up even more than for being a paraeducator during this COVID season. The reason for my stress was because my husband and I had just gotten appraisals on our Proposition 13 property with the intent to buy out my husband's parents' trust and farmland. Our son, who already lives on the property with his family and 4 children, just planted about 100 avocado trees in the hopes of farming them, continuing a family farm that has been here since 1960. We were hoping to have our grandchildren close by us. Clearly, we are stuck in a very heartbreaking position of not being able to sell our former home, buy out the trust in time to put our son's name on the title. We understand that the state needs more taxes, but not providing an adequate transition period for people will ultimately shoot the state in the foot, as long-standing farmlands are going to be lost in this higher taxes land grab. Most people are in the middle of COVID, and some will not even have access to a vaccine until spring or perhaps even summer. The February 16th date to have these laws altering the rules and mandates of the state we are just barely even finding out about them. And we feel it to be very unfair and, quite frankly, despicable. Let's put a human face on this. Our son, who was an A student and won the first place in the California State Horticulture competitions 2 years running in the early 1980s, is about to learn that his dreams of staying on
Caller, thank you.
in his home and avocado farm.
Thank you.
I'm
Caller,
almost
your
done.
line is-
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next comment comes from the line of Lilana. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is Lilana from Berkeley for Assessment Tax Equity. And I've joined your board meeting to explain an urgent matter, and it's haphazard and inequitable tax assessments in Berkeley. And I ask you for your immediate action. Voter-approved taxes are equity-based in Berkeley. A small home would pay less tax assessment than a large home. Unfortunately, the city has been calculating and the county billing for services incorrectly, throwing uniformity out the window, even though uniformity is guaranteed by the Constitution and was affirmed in Boricas versus Alameda School District in 2012. The small group of 11 harmed homeowners have applied to the county for tax appeal. Our rights to be heard under California Tax Code 5099 have not been. Also, because we have quantified significant revenue losses, we have signed affidavits under Code 1362. 6 new affidavits from harmed citizens attesting to knowledge of escaped assessments are being delivered to Keith Carson's office this week. Our appeal to you is this. Look at our data on berkeleytaxes.info. The inconsistencies are undeniable. We must ask, how could an elderly widow in a single-family home pay more in city taxes than a 24-unit market building? Okay, now, spoiler alert. When you ask the city and the county about this, they will completely deny any misfeasance. There are easy ways to check the veracity of what they say. Please ask the city and county to substantiate any claim they make with evidence, photos, permit records, and diagrams. Otherwise, they will pull a fast one on you the same way they did a small claims court judge in September 2019. In conclusion, we beseech you to exercise your oversight capacity of the Alameda County Assessor to force the extensive reconciliation needed to bring the city's dwelling square footage taxes into conformity. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions. 925-360-2634. Thanks.
And ladies and gentlemen, if there are further public comments, you may press 1 and then 0 at this time. There are no further comments in the comment queue.
Thank you. Members, that pretty much concludes our agenda for today. And I know today was primarily just really updates, but our meeting coming up on the 23rd and possibly the 24th, we will most likely have some legislation before us and hopefully be able to have a deeper dive into this Prop 19 in terms of some of this cleanup language. But I would like to, just say thank you to staff and to our 2 assessors that have been very active with me and my staff and the BOE staff these last 2-3 weeks. And that is our chair, Mr. Ernest Dronenberg, and my assessor from LA, Jeff Prang, for your time and energy. Really appreciate it. And I know you're going to still continue to work with us on this as it moves forward. But with that, let me just see if there's any other closing remarks from any of the other members before we adjourn. I see Member Gaines' hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to make some comments, if I could, about Mark Durham in closing, and wanted to recognize Mark as he begins his new position as an Assistant Deputy Director at the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Mark had a position of great responsibility here at the board, and during his tenure, Mark counseled the executive director, board members, and staff on complex tax rate and statistical matters, testified before legislative committees, and gave advice on the potential impacts of tax policy proposal. Mark's contributions greatly enhance the BOE, and we're going to miss him here at the Board of Equalization. So I just want to congratulate him, though, on his new position and thank him for his service to the people of California. And then just as a final comment, I wanted to thank you, Chair Vasquez, for this hearing. I thought it was very productive and well organized. I want to thank Ernie for all of his leadership with the County Assessors Association, Brenda Fleming with her leadership within the board. But I think things are going well, and we have challenges in front of us, and we're trying to provide answers for our constituents as soon as we can on this Prop 19 issue. But the responsiveness is something that I think we want to shine light on and recognize that things are going well. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I would just like to, as we adjourn today, once again, just adjourn in memory of all the victims, the lives that we're still losing under COVID-19. I'm reminded of it, especially in LA County here, where, you know, we go through our ups and downs, but this last couple of weeks, especially after the holidays, we seem to have hit another spike. But hopefully now, as we're seeing more and more people get vaccinated, we will begin to see this begin to turn around for many of us in many of our communities. But with that, I just want to remind everybody to keep ourselves safe as possible, wear those masks. I know it's been really daunting and inconvenient for a lot of us, but I think the more we comply with this, the quicker we'll get out of this COVID-19. Unless there's any other adjournments that people want to make.
Vice Chair Schaefer
yes,
here.
Vice Chair Schaefer, go ahead.
I just want to announce that I've been vaccinated as the oldest constitutional officer, and if any of you get to be 65 or over, I'm sure you'll be vaccinated too. Okay.
I'm not just about ready. I'm 65, so I'm waiting. I'm hearing it. It might happen by the end of this month. We'll see. But no, I think hopefully soon everybody will.
Your vaccination. Hopefully I don't have to wait till I turn 65 to get it.
No. I mean, we're hoping that everybody will be able to get vaccinated in the next couple of months, but I know that's a daunting task for a state of 40 million people, but
I think we are all essential people, Chair Vasquez.
Yes. Well, with that, let me just officially adjourn this meeting today, and it's 2:21, and we will reconvene our next meeting on February the 23rd, 2021 at 10 a.m. Thank you again for your patience and all your great questions today. And once again, thank Ernie. I see Ernie still with us for sticking it out with us. And of course, Jeff Prang and his staff as well. Thank you all. Enjoy, and we'll see and talk to you soon, hopefully with some good news here in the next day or two. Thank you once again.
Great, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, members.